Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Midweek Geek. Don't I sound like a professional presenter there? Welcome to this week's edition of Midweek Geek. I'm joined by Saxius. Hello, Saxius.
Hello, hello.
I don't know if anyone else is joining me tonight. I haven't paid much attention to Discord today. It's been a busy day at work. So this is one of Saxius's topics. He's a master of coming up with discussion topics, things that he likes to talk about. So, hello to everybody who's in chat at the moment. El's certainly been here. General Nut, and we have Gunpilled Slan and Halakar, Mage's Musings, Ian McDonald, and AB Mark II. I've read out 7 names there, and just as I say that, the number in chat goes up to 7. So there we go. And Ian, I believe you are in Britain, aren't you? I believe, because it is dark and wet here outside. The television's gone from behind me. The wife's moved it. That's no bad thing. We never used it anyway. Right. Any games this week?
Yes, I've had games. I had the finale of the Curse of Strahd game. So 5th edition.
Marvelous.
They
Here's
had
Elfbait, by the way.
wonderful.
Hello, Elfbait.
Right on time.
I'm late, but I'm still beautiful.
That I don't think anyone would say otherwise. You've got a majestic beard and just the looks that goes right with it.
No camera today, despite the beauty. But
listen, we'd be failing the charm rolls.
Continue. Tell us about your wonderful Curse of Strahd that I was reading about.
Yes, I had a great deal of fun. The big showdown was happening because throughout as you do, you start learning, which players you can poke and prod, which ones you can yank at their chains to sort of get them going in the right directions. And I did everything. I got them really riled up. I did some things, kidnapped some NPCs, and it all resulted in them effectively sort of going like, that's it. It's on. And they went to Ravenloft. They stormed in only to find that he had basically been like, well, you were expected all along. The butler's here. You're now following the flowers over into the chapel where the music is playing, and they're then sort of presented with the corpse of Irina's dad, who's standing ready to sort of, walk the bride down the aisle. And then they're sort of being presented with the whole thing of, well, where is the bride? And from there, it just sort of went downhill with Strahd just simply getting more and more agitated, and the fight ensued in the chapel. And it was great. I made use of the fighter's capabilities in 5th edition, so lots of cool maneuvers, lots of multiple attacks. I threw out the rules of him having limitations for how often he could use it, because he's undead. He's not exactly going to be running out of constitution, so to speak. And then the fact that he's got all the legendary abilities to do multiple attacks, it just meant that he walked in and he was controlling the battlefield. The players were genuinely afraid of him, and he would then be they should exactly, and he was then leading them around, and it became a sort of cat and mouse game of he would lead them into a room, they'd be ambushed by other creatures, he'd be standing watching them regenerating, then come back in, do a lot more fencing, fighting, taking on 2 of the players at the same time. At one point they managed to get enough blows that he would have to start doing taking steps back. They try to get him cornered towards a pillar, but then, Spider Climb comes in, and he just starts walking up it, and they're now having to fight him in such an awkward position that I give the players disadvantage, but I'm not going to penalize Strahd because he's done this before. He's done it 100 times before. This is nothing new. So, yeah, so it was a fantastic game. It lasted about 6 hours of us going through. Yeah, it was great. And it was within the first hour I got them straight to Ravenloft, and they initiated the combat very quickly.
Did they win in the end? Did they die? Any of them die?
It was a bittersweet victory. I got the bard down to doing save or die rolls, which was great. I had the highest HP to be 20. The rest of them were simmering around 12 and below. So they were all sort of very defensive at the very end, trying to just throw out everything that they could. It became just a desperate gamble from the player's point of view. But after almost a year of me just psychologically hamping them up, now being in front of Strahd, actually hearing me taunting them, standing up and like walking over and around the table and like generally just like implying as much psychological warfare as I could to the players. They were sweating. They were what's it called? They were feeling the pressure, and although they won at the end.
Now then, Satchel, while I fully appreciate the fact that you made them sweat, you made them go through the mill and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you, Hungar. Oh, look at this. I'm just going to shut up. Oh,
wow.
Hey, the mighty. Oh, I like your new little picture there, Hungar. That is marvelous. Hungar, the Starvarian. Yes. I must say, I am disappointed in you, Saxius, because I run Ravenloft.
Yep.
But I ran it in first edition.
Yep.
And Strahd slaughtered the entire party.
Yes, and
that is what is supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be a happy ending. He is supposed to.
Oh no, I got my ending. Don't you worry, because I've been keeping track of all the things they've been doing since the beginning of the game, and at the very end. Oh god, yes, I had spreadsheets, I had events, I had how they were all interconnected, and at the end, I then went, "That's great. They're all sort of done." I let the players, go around. I let them loot the place. I let them feel like, "Oh God, we've won." They gathered it all up. They got ready to walk out, and then I pointed at the Paladin. I said, "Give me your character sheet." I took it away from her, and I wrote on it, "Dark Lord of Barovia," and handed it straight back to her, and everyone screamed. I had two players jump up from the table and just like, "No!" Ah! And yes, I sat there grinning from ear to just like, I got you. I got you.
So yeah, you have redeemed yourself. But yeah,
thank
you. I'm gonna say hello to
you're
Omen
supposed to pull out the sword, the sun sword, and then you're supposed to go over with the mirrors so you can get him when he's down in the thing. So you can make sure that there's a natural light right down there, so he can't ever heal back in his coffin. No. Or if you do rifts, you somehow figure out the moat and you put them in running water. No.
In rifts, we used to drive around in a big armored vehicle with a sprinkler system on the outside of it because moving water was an issue for vampires in rifts. So
yeah,
sprinklers and water cannons was all we needed to do to drive around Mexico with impunity. But
I'm sorry,
I ran a game.
All I can think is the horn that plays La Cucaracha as you do that.
Why not?
I ran a game of Middle Earth on Saturday night, and I have to say it's probably been our best session yet. In fact, it was definitely our best session yet. My party have managed. I used bits and pieces from the Bree and the Barrow Downs module and just twisted it a little bit. I thought my party might want to take on a few bandits who'd been hitting caravans as they've been leaving Bray. But no, they just followed the bandits and scoped them out a bit. And there's this little snippet in there that the bandit leader's having an affair with a young girl from one of the big families in Bray. So I thought, well, where are they going to be meeting up? And the party happened to walk past the point on the map that I'd eyeballed for where they'd be meeting up. So I had them make sort of these perception rolls. And one of them, in order to succeed in the perception roll properly in MERP, you've got to get a very high result. And one of them got a very high result. So I said, in the frost, because it's winter, you see this sort of about 7 foot by 4 foot rectangular indentation where the frost hasn't formed properly, as if something was there last night. So they scoped out that area and they worked out a place to hide. And that was where the bandit was bringing his tent, meeting up his lady friend from Bree to spend the nights. So they stopped and waited until observed until they heard giggling coming from the tent. at which point they charged the tent. All rolled really badly, so they tumbled down the hill into the tent, and a big fight broke out. And because the bandit wasn't wearing his armor and wasn't armed at the time, they managed to take him out. But there was a section where he was trying to get away on his horse, and he rolled very badly, and one of them grappled him at the same time. So I said that his horse, his saddle, will have slipped. So he was dangling under his horse, and one of the players jumped on the horse and rode it round and round and round, and it was like the horse is galloping around. All you can hear is this oof, oof, oh, get off, stop it, you buggers, from underneath the horse as he's bouncing. I bet it was one of those ones where you just go with the rolls. You know, the sort of sessions where you just make it up as you go with the rolls. But it was a lot of fun, and they've taken out the he's described as being a very suave bandit as well, very self-assured, which is why I thought, he's meeting his lady friend. He doesn't care. Anyhow, it ended last session with him unconscious, and they wrapped the girl up in. They collapsed the tent and wrapped her up in it, and they are carrying them back to town with her wrapped up in the tent, and he's sort of unconscious, dangling from the horse. And as General Nutt says there, and no rolls went your way except a perception roll that really mattered, and that grapple roll. So
all I can think is, it's like the Yellow Rose of Texas in the battle with Santa Anna.
I don't know it.
Well, he wasn't ready for the Texans when they came in, and he was with his mistress, who was known as the Yellow Rose of Texas, and so she. That's one of the reasons that they surprised him and he lost the battle at San Jacinto. And then he tried to escape, and the problem was apparently one of the soldiers they were looking for him saluted him and said, "My lord!" And yes, that was. Oh no! Wow, now you're rolling in the money with Hungar.
Splendid, Hungar, splendid. Yes, we are celebrating the existence of Hungar the Starvarian tonight, as he's been a very generous soul. I think we should all say thank you, Hungar. You are most generous, and you have a fine beard. Right. Anyway, are we all up on tonight's topic, which is divine magic? The idea of magic coming through belief.
I'm set.
You're set.
Yeah.
Omanal's muted.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure my son does his
as much as I ever will be
homeschooling. So I just you all can hear me on him telling him how to do math. So do you want to make appearance? Okay, so he said no, so no appearance from him.
Right. Okay, so Saxius, as you suggested this topic, give me your opening salvo.
Well, it's funny because we've got, our arcane magic, which is coming into various flavors, from, the schooled wizards, from the, emotionally powerful sorcerers to the warlocks who makes their packs. And then, we jump all the way over to the people who just truly believe very strongly. And often when I run the divine characters, I take personal care to make sure that each of the different divine characters are given a way of being different from the others. So, for example, with the Paladins, we all know about their lawful order. We know about their need of having a very strict, regime in their beliefs, their oaths, their way of life, all the way over to then the preaching clerics and how, even the god that they've chosen will have a very big impact, and, down to bit of their personality, but also down to how they would have to then preach out and prove that they've got the the faith that would be granting them the powers to be vassals of the gods. Even as far even the more what's it called, nuanced version for the druids, where it is a lot more about the balance and understanding how the druids are meant to be a lot more flexible when it comes to the various forms of environments that they find in, how they have to adapt, much like nature itself. I find that it's definitely worth a topic to discuss because there are many ways to be doing it. Recently, that's also a very good one. Recently, I did send a Dragon magazine to Elf. Well, I say recently, it was a while back, where it actually goes through how you can monitor a cleric's divine, faith through a point system. Simply, do they believe? Do they pray? Do they preach? Do they go out of their way to use their powers in order to enhance their ethos, their gods, and so forth? Because often when we've got a multi-pantheon world, there are going to be very many agendas, and specifically when we look at clerics, for example, there are going to be many ways that they want to pursue and push out the agenda of their god. So that's where I come from. It they're all unique. They all have to be looked at in a sort of case by case, and it's worth at least discussing with the players to make sure that what they view from their characters can also be worked in. So I'll stop talking here.
That's a cool system, the piety system that in that Dragon magazine. I cut it down and revamped it and meshed it with a little bit of stuff from the Theros book for a 5th edition version of it recently. So I actually sent that to you when it is for the Viking campaign that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Good. My main. When I recently homebrewed a world, whenever I homebrew a world, I like to design my own pantheons. Though I tend to keep them quite small, quite compact. I don't want to overdo it. There were 2 pantheons I've created recently. One had the basic 9 gods, 1 per alignment. Just keep for simplicity purposes. I was using that campaign to teach the players 2nd edition AD&D, and more recently, I trimmed it down and used the Celtic Gaelic idea of the idea of the 3. So there were 3 deities. One, the neutral one in the middle was sort of like the god of all, the all-encompassing sort of world god who only cared that the world went on as it should in a balance. And then there was the good. He's the only male deity. The other 2 were female deities, but they were the opposites of each other. There was the good female deity, who I had as his wife, who had her 3 embodiments were the maiden, the mother, and the crone. The maiden being youthfulness, fertility, joy. The mother being duty, the family, and the crone being life, death, fate. But all of hers tended towards the good side of things. Whereas on the other side, I delved into the idea, the Celtic idea of the Morrigan deity. But again, I had 3 faces of her as well. A more fatalistic one, a more organized one, a more sort of worldly one, but again, quite a destructive worldly one. And then there was the evil one, death, disease, chaos, war, and that's how I did the deities for that world. And I found that sort of balance of just trimming them down helped me focus on what societies would believe and what societies would want. And it gave some, I had a player who picked one of the deities. He picked Booker, who is the male deity, the neutral one. And he was utterly fervent, utter zealot. And he played him like, he described him as a bit of an asshole, to be honest. In that how fervent he is. In that, but he played him well. played him very well in that sense. Enough to say that he didn't like his character. He liked playing him, but he didn't like his character as a person, which was I like it when players do that. But they play a character that they wouldn't personally get on with in real life. Anyway, I'm just going to add a disruptive element to the stream.
Uh-oh.
Hello.
Oh, put your fingers in your ears. Hello, DK. How are you?
Hi.
I thought you might be tempted by this topic.
Yeah, I thought it was 9:30 that you were starting. I would have joined earlier.
Well, it's never 9:30 that I start.
Anyway,
let's go around the table. Elfbait, do you have any sort of input on this general topic?
I create my own pantheons usually, and I often create my game worlds with layers of pantheons and layers of belief. For my human-centric Valdyria campaign, kind of a Renaissance era style D&D campaign, but without gunpowder, I had the original faith that they brought with them when they came to the land, to the campaign world. I wrote up the faith that they discovered once they got there, a local faith, and then a few like other faiths from like the orcs, so that they conquered and stuff in the area, and because the setting has like civilized orcs that have been subsumed into the greater empire. Current campaign, I've got something similar. I've got the faith that was brought with the people as they settled into the area, the local faith. And then I always love to put in lots of minor, old and forgotten gods, whether that's like a giant ape god or a devourer worm or, some weird, freaky goddess of mysteries and the mists, they're always there. And those are usually put there for players to discover, for strange mysteries of the campaign world, or often because I play a lot of 5th edition these days, for warlocks to grab onto as patrons. I tend to just brew a lot of stuff from scratch.
Sounds like you use in general more deities than I tend to.
Too many, probably, because like for any given sphere of influence, there's probably like 3 or 4 different gods that the players could choose from. It really comes down to what culture they attach to, and that's my history anthropology brain coming to work. Because there's always going to be those forgotten religions, those religions from the previous generations that are still hanging around, is kind of the mysteries and all of that. And I like having that there, and then using it to tie into games and like old temples and. Like there's in my current game, there's a thing called the Troll Mothers, and they're these weird idols that kind of dot the countryside in holes in the ground. Basically, some farmer will be digging around, and one of his cows will fall down a hole, and he'll go investigate it, crawl down there, and there'll be a hollow in the ground with this big, grotesque, female idol, and they've been named the Troll Mothers, even though they have nothing to do with the trolls, but they have like weird restorative abilities if you're willing to sacrifice for them, and they're tied to some old forgotten religion that dug holes in the ground or just found natural holes and made them into chapels to idols. And that I just love that kind of texture when it comes to religion.
I mean, I picked out images for idols for the deities I mentioned in my game, and it appears Halakar says he's dated them. But I found pictures of the sort of idols that have been dug up from Celtic times, like the pregnant mother goddesses and things like those little sort of stone statuettes, and I was using those in the game to try and help with the imagery, which I think it helped. It helped. I like to lean back on a bit of sort of reality in that sense. It helps give a bit of grounding to the game.
Yeah. I will say that when it comes to like non-human deities, I tend to just go with the ones that D&D invented.
Yeah,
because they're not attached to any particular history or anything like that. So I don't feel like I'm just cheesing about it. Like, oh look, it's Odin. What's he doing here?
Like the goblins, Maglubiet and Raxivort of the Svarts, and
Grumsh, and
Grumsh,
or as we like to call him, Orc Odin. But
I'm going to want to come to this sort of topic a bit later on, Darthik, but having things like the religious holidays and practices is something I wanted to get into more if my campaign had gone on a little bit longer. It's certainly that AD&D one, but that was sort of alternating with my Orient Express one when COVID hit, so didn't really continue much with that. Enio, Omanal, what's your take on?
I'm going to be as lazy as I can in this aspect, which is I'm going to take whatever existing pantheons out there and grab them. And it's a couple of things. There are a couple of reasons for it. One is it's really easy to do research on it, so you can find out religious holidays and practices and things. I mean, if you're really interested in it, then you can just change the name so they don't know, and you go, oh, instead of Odin, I'll just call him, you just name him something else. This is and that. Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing that exactly. You can, and that's
just call him Grumsh, and you're good.
Yeah.
But Grumsh is evil. That's the problem. Grumsh is evil.
Well, Odin.
It's all from a certain point of view. I'm going to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi there, but
Grumsh is evil.
I'm sure the orcs don't think he's evil.
Yeah, but they're evil as well, and I don't care. They're evil, and I don't care.
Gentlemen, let's get on with it.
They know that they're evil and they embrace it. That's what makes villains so much fun, is when they embrace their evil and just play with it all the way through. It makes it less much fun if they when it starts being morally gray. I mean, there are other games that do that better, but D&D, at least the old style of D&D, is so, how do I want to put this? It's so tied to alignment that to remove that basically removes some of the very core aspects of what makes it D&D, in my opinion. And
the objective forces in the world. I know DK likes the simple law, neutrality, chaos. That you're on the side of.
No, I've gone completely to the other side. It's now good, neutral, and evil. Good, neutral, and evil.
Oh, you've changed it. You've changed your opinion since we last discussed this.
Oh my God! See, I'm thinking that you go to the Palladium version. When you go to the full part of alignment, and you just go good, selfish, evil.
No, they have.
I mean,
that's totally different. That's not the topic of today's chat.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
But I mean, alignment is so fundamental to the aspects of D&D of good versus evil. To have devils and demons, and to remove that just makes it pretty generic. Which I understand that's what 5e is going for, to be about as generic as possible. But I think by doing so, you've lost some of what made it really unique.
It makes sense if you're creating a pantheon to build around those sort of cosmic forces as well. To have gods that define the core tenets of those alignments.
I always find the whole. Oh, good. Sorry.
Oh, Calstaff is gone. Bye, Calstaff.
And anyone that does.
He's just arrived. He's just arrived.
Oh, I thought you were saying good evening is in. My bad. Sorry.
Oh, okay. But then the other part that I enjoy with that whole aspect is very similar to what Elfbait talks about. I like those little minor gods. Not, and the village is not going to have, a 7th or 8th level cleric that needs the higher level spells. So for them to give like 1st, 2nd, or 3rd level spells, or even 1st and 2nd level spells, is more than enough for small villages.
It's funny you mention that. In my current campaign, my players found the most annoying but frequently found god around the campaign setting. I have a patron god of travelers who's sort of like also been picked up by adventurers as the patron saint kind of a guy, but their clerics don't do much of anything. They're like barely.
That's
like,
weird.
Well,
the god of travelers who don't do anything.
Well, yeah, there's just like they're like, can you get us holy waters? Like, we don't do that here. Can you give us a blessing? I can give you a blessing of travel, safe journey. But
and if you look at a lot of them, and I think this is the thing that when we talk about clerics, a lot of times there's a pantheon associated with it, and so there's the other aspect that you get is we all talk about clerics, the one deity, but sometimes you go, but some of these societies had multiple deities they worshipped, and then the question is, well, who do you pray to? it's that's the other aspect in there. And then and I guess this becomes very similar. I like the gods to be around their cultural aspect. I want Norse gods up in the north. I would like Egyptian gods in the desert with pyramids. Those are other aspects that get into it. So then it's like, well, my god is more powerful than yours. And part of it comes down to it's not that I want direct conflict between the gods. It's more of, I expect you to be my followers and worshipers, go out and spread my faith. And if you fail to do so, then you are a failure as an adventurer, and go back home and do your little piety thing in your alcove for the rest of your life if you can't do anything meaningful. So, but that's the way that I look at it. And when you start talking about paladins, that's the martial arm. I understand that the old one, they want to talk about the Knights Templar and things, but to me, your paladins are your Knights of the Holy Grail. Go adventure and go find crap. And then your clerics you're here to spread and administer the faith and to build more temples.
Yep.
That's your job.
The preachers.
Yes.
Yeah.
The old friars, you're there to record. You're there to provide the spiritual aspects of your conquistadors. That's the whole thing that comes to it from there. That's the way I look at it.
Fair enough.
But DK, your take on creating gods for your worlds?
This is interesting in the sense that it depends on the kind of world I'm going for. Do I want to? Because I play a game called Lords of Olympus, where you get to play actual gods. And what I've noticed in that in that particular pantheon, as many real life polytheistic pantheons tend to be, the gods embody very messy portfolios. You don't just get a god like that. That's kind of the problem I have with D&D polytheistic gods, because they're really what would be like saints in the Catholic faith. They're like, this is the god of shepherds and farmers and agriculture, and this is the god of war and strife. It's like, no, this would be Apollo, for instance, is the god of music, the god of healing, the god of shepherds and travelers who go far from home. He's the god of music and the sun. He's a god of enlightenment. He is a god of civilization, and he embodies all of these things. And that's because over time, people were adding and adding and adding to his portfolio and melding him with other gods. So I want polytheistic pantheons to be extremely messy, but they fit into this kind of this framework, this archetype that makes sense if you like. On the surface, if you look at it, you don't see any connection between, say, medicine and music. What do those two things have in common? But then you look at it in the broader perspective of he's a god of enlightenment. Then it's, oh yeah, well, he's obviously a god of cities and civilization.
And
whereas what I would do,
music come with
you can't have you can't have like the kind of you can't have the kind of music he likes unless you have a very structured and orderly civilization. And this also reflects in the fact that his sister is the exact opposite. She is of the wild places, and whereas he embraced adulthood, she kind of embraces adolescence. She wants to be wild and free. She is a huntress. But she's also the god of virginal maidens. She's the goddess of the moon. Like they're diametrically opposed, and yet they get along so well. Like this is the thing that I really like about this pantheon. It's extremely sophisticated because it's not very regimented and straightforward. There's a lot of depth here that you can apply, thus leading to a lot of conflict. But how I would handle monotheistic faiths is very simple. I treat all the true gods as lawful or good. And that could be like the Egyptian pantheon, or like the Zoroastrians, or Jesus, or Muhammad. I treat them all as manifestations of law, and people just debate on like our God is a manifestation, an avatar of the true God of law or good. And the debate comes in which is the truest manifestation. But all other things, like say Odin or the old pagan gods, like of the Greek and the Celtics, they're neutral or absolutely evil, and they're to be absolutely expunged because they're extremely dangerous and not to be trusted.
I'm gonna.
That's how I handle it. And I also don't treat clerics as preachers. I treat them as holy warriors. That's what priests are for. They are the proselytizers. The clerics are the warriors, as are the paladins. They're both warrior monks.
I'm gonna. You're talking about the I want to call it maybe we should say the polytheistic pantheon. So whenever you have multiple pantheons, I kind of like treating it like you do that Neil Gaiman does in. Now, not so much where they have the American Gods, more of the how he did it in Sandman myself.
I haven't seen Sandman, so I can't comment on it.
I mean, read the comics. I don't know about this. Because they've been out for 30 plus years. Come on.
Well, I've never been really big into comics, man. I didn't really read them when I was a kid.
I'm just teasing you.
I know.
Anyways, now taking it back into the whole. Oh, sorry. Did you want to do something, Geeky?
Yeah, I just brought up Grumpy Slan's comment because certainly in the homebrew world I made, it was very much a case of there were shrines dotted around the villages and towns to the beneficial aspects of the various deities, and the populace would revere whichever aspect they needed at any one time. And while the clerics go down a certain direction, the clerics of the various beneficial aspects got on fine because they respected each other's take. A lot of them were worshipping the same god, but just in a slightly different way. That was the idea of the three.
So from a spell,
the crone, for example.
So from a spell standpoint, do they get access to everything, or do you limit it depending on which on how they view their deity, even if the deity encompasses everything?
I would give them access to whatever's relevant to their chosen specified branch of the deity, but I have to say in my game we didn't actually get that far. I can't remember in my AD&D one. I can't remember anyone play cleric. It was someone played a cleric in my 5th edition one where I butchered the rules, and because he though he was zealous absolutely fervent for his god and tended towards law and order, his god was essentially neutral and covered any possible alignment, and thus I just said that opens up pretty much whatever spells you want. That it's pretty much the all-encompassing god of everything, the all-powerful, the almighty type. Anyway, Zach, just what you're saying.
Well, I was just going to go in with, I think it's now worth for us to discuss, how we view for the various forms of religions or the deities and how they would then be bringing in the actual divine magic, because that is where the main meat and potatoes are meant to be, the belief in the magic, where the belief of of where the gods give it out. And we have more or less established that, the paladins, they are divine warriors. They are chosen by the gods. They're granted these privileges and these rights that are given to them, though they come with the responsibilities of acting and behaving certain ways in order for the gods to basically go out. If it's a good god, go out and be a crusader for the cause of said god or goddess, equally so. If they are paladins, fallen paladins, or anti-paladins of an evil one, there would be a similar, pull and push for them to go out and act in accordance. but I think it's definitely worth discussing, how we view, for example, for the clerics, because the books will happily tell us, paladins have to have these things, but the clerics doesn't get the same sort of say, because although they are granted a lot more, how would you put it, like a lot more divine, a lot more material powers from the gods. And that's where I think that it's almost worth looking down at, which god is the cleric following, and what are the expectations from said god to the cleric. That's how I keep on top of it. That, and I used some piety points to make sure that the player isn't exactly just taking it for the benefits of, I get magic, who cares? I can do what I want.
I like the idea of piety points. I'd like to have a read of that article, and possibly bung it across at some point. I'd have a look at that. I just want to slightly divert.
What?
I know there's a bit of a modern leaning towards not having to have a deity, and I've seen discussions on Reddit groups. I've seen discussions on some Reddit groups about how do I make an atheist cleric.
I've had that player. I've had that player.
You've had that player.
I've had that player.
I don't allow any of my player characters in my basic, my standard D&D world to be in denial of the gods, because the gods in that world objectively exist.
Yeah,
whether they follow a deity is up to them. Clerics have to. Paladins have to. All the other characters accept the gods exist. It's up to them whether they follow one.
I'm going to have to.
There's
I'm going to ask
no
a more
choice in
simple
that matter.
question, which is, how can you be atheist when the gods literally manifest
exist
on your
Well,
world?
that's what we were talking about with it being objective. That's also like the whole. That goes back to the earlier discussion on alignment, like the whole argument of how can entire races be evil? Well, because they were created by a god literally to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly I think the point of it is, people want to do, well, I'm doing this. Well, then don't play that race in certain cases. I think that's sometimes what people forget about.
Everybody can play it however they want, but I'm just saying, if your argument is that if you're playing like traditional D&D, where like Geek says, the gods are objectively real. They can reach down out of the sky, lift your house up off the ground, and throw it across the countryside if they really want to. It's near impossible. It's impossible to make those arguments.
Or if I would even say the game I play Lion and Dragon, and in that game, God doesn't manifest in the world. His miracles do, but it's up in the air on whether or not, is it but it is accepted in that world that God is real because the church told you he's real, and you follow the church, and if you're not, you're a heretic.
Well, that game is
that's just
very much set around
medieval Europe,
type beliefs. So, and that was accepted in those times. If you denied the existence of God in those times, you risked being burnt. I would say, what people need to do when they come into why do I have to be a believer? Why can't I be an atheist? Yeah, because here's the thing: your people in your world would believe in the gods in the same way we in the real world believe gravity exists. Yes.
And there are people who deny it, and those people are, they can deny it all they want. I just don't agree with them.
The ancient world that still questioned the existence of gods and chose to disbelieve.
No. I'm going to bring up another aspect to all this. Fine, you can play a cleric. You just get no spells because they don't manifest from your deity. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it starts coming down to. And then the player's like, well, but I want spells. Well, you want to play an atheist. Pick one or the other. Or the other view on this is, I'm going to bring this up a little bit different. There's a class called the monk, right?
Yeah.
You can pick that one instead, and that one can be whatever you want to be. And I mean, there were a lot of, this is where, if you ever look at the Dragon magazines, there were tons of NPC or classes out there that were really never intended to be used by
Yeah,
players.
NPC classes, work pretty common. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Oracle, the
Anti-Paladin.
the grave digger.
Mm.
I mean, I'm the politician. I mean,
The
the
merchant.
bureaucrat. Yeah, I mean, they're really into, which kind of bugs me on that is, well, you're a 4th level and you're just going. Anyway, I understand.
I will say MK2 says atheist clerics would be magic users. I don't actually agree with that, because even magic users in standard D&D would acknowledge that the gods created magic, like arcane magic.
They just have no use for them.
I disagree with that. They would be magic users, and I'm okay with that. But then they're not clerics, because you don't have someone proselytizing. I mean, that's what I find funny. If you're not proselytizing, you're not playing a cleric. What are you going to do? Don't believe? Well, then you know what? There's a fighter and there's a thief, and there are plenty of classes that have no magical abilities, and you can, if you really want one, what is the if you want to have a null field for the character where magic doesn't work around them. Okay, fine. You have no magical items don't work for you. All of this stuff, that's great for you. But I don't know about you, but if I see a dragon that's coming over about ready to breathe on me, there are no atheists in foxholes, and the same thing applies if you see a dragon.
I would say that what's actually funny is that you say that a cleric without God has no magic. I would in the game I run, a cleric who's lost his power, he's fucked. Like they'll kill him. Like if a cleric can't manifest his power like at all, then that means God doesn't like him. And if that happens, not good. Not good.
Not all gods are vengeful.
I mean,
in my game,
we're talking two different things. Is you just get a cleric, you get whatever's in there with no spells or any divine abilities, and all of a sudden you're going, well, then why would I play a cleric? Well, exactly. Okay, I don't have to kill you off. Because you're an atheist. That doesn't mean anything. And if you want to play a monk.
But taking it away from the atheist discussion, there's still the whole thing of, right, you now do believe you are a cleric. Now, what's it going to be down to? Because now I think this is where the aspect of the actual god then comes in. You always say the god of war. Well, then you can perhaps even argue that, you don't have to have a blunt instrument, although blunt instruments are horrifying weapons when you actually look at the damage that they do to the body. Or if they can take on other aspects of it. You can also have the whole aspect of, they can have restricted spells. Some gods might not feel like you don't need divination. You don't need to be able to see the future. You need to be able to cast, protection, or you need to be able to be in touch with the elements. And then you start having, how the different gods will be different. At least that's the way I've been running my second edition, is that each god has got their spheres of influence, which will directly impact what spells you can cast as a cleric. And that in turn means that some gods, if you really want to be able to cast certain spells, you've got to go for them. And those gods come with, certain requirements that you as a cleric.
That's very much the second edition sort of approach with the speciality priests, isn't it? Where you had it brought in sort of the fields.
They made
the sphere of influence.
So they made the specialty one, but the specialty clerics were meant to be like, you are extraordinarily special for this god. Like, you stand out amongst all the others, and you get a bunch of other things.
It kind of added a weird bureaucracy to some religions. Like, you have the clerics, the generalist clerics at the top, and then he's in the Department of Agriculture over there. And then,
it does generate some funny ones. But what I generally just did was, I would just say, like, the gods decide the magic you get access to, and then on top of that, you would get some specific abilities depending on your level. It doesn't have to be that you have to have X amount of stat, or you have to do this or blah. It's to do with where you chose to basically become chosen by. But that's where I would then have it different. Like, in my current campaign, I've got in total 8 gods, 5 of them for the human factions, 2 for, elves and dwarves, and then 1 for the big evil god.
None for the halflings? How dare you, sir?
No, they've got some few in there, but they've been lumped in with the human domains. They fall under Chis, which is my goddess of life, death, divination, and beauty. So that's where they basically fall in, as they like to live sort of, life on the road, the beauty of the freedom, free people able to go out and live, the life, to the fullest without, restrictions of border, serfdom, or the social hierarchies of the human kingdom. However, as it's, each of the gods has got different requirements. Like we had a player for the god of agriculture, and he would get a lot of bonuses for when it came to healing and looking after people, animals, families, all of these things, because that was the entire stick. You are family oriented. You are about the land, the people, the animals, the insects that made up this ecology. And the players have recently run into a cleric of the god of war, and they are vastly different. Like the god of war is just like, we've got to go out and do things. We got to be on the move. We got to do things, hyperactive. Not exactly an idiot, but like they are physical people. They got to go out and they got to do things. They got to make achievements.
There's an immediacy to their approach compared to the other.
Yeah.
The others are more passive.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they've only recently, because two of the players decided that it would be a fantastic idea to stitch up a criminal rival, by doing what's called for a kite, basically an anonymous note sent to the nearby county capital to the Temple of Quantarius, which, as the name suggests, is to do with money and numbers. And that's the equivalent of the tax division of the kingdom. So they've now shown up, and they're now having to deal with a very numerically, very fact-orientated cleric who's come in. They have gotten exactly what they want, but they're not leaving because they're like, this was too easy. I've got to now categorically go through every part of this town to make sure we've done this right. So they're now experiencing what it's like to have, what the different religions are like. They work in a symbiotic fashion because they have to, because there are greater evils that they have to overcome.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would look at it, Blaine. That comment with Blaine is like, magic.
Yeah.
Magic should be the manipulation of the ley lines of the natural world, and clerical magic is supernatural. Like clerics should be able to do things that magic users just cannot do at all, because they're drawing from a reality beyond their own.
I'm going to say one thing here when he's talking about this, and we're going to, if you actually read the Dungeon Master's Guide for 1E, it specifically says where the powers come from. For magic users, it's from the positive and negative planes, whereas for the clerics, it comes from their deities directly. So,
yeah.
And now I have this healing and war. Because you don't want all your warriors to die.
Having said that, the Greyhawk had a god of magic. I believe that was Bokob.
Yes, Bokob.
Who was the god of magic users, pretty much. So I had always assumed that the magic users would
worship him,
have him as their patron.
A lot of fantasy interpretations of like Norse mythology place like Odin as the god of magic.
God of magic.
Or Freya, Greek stuff like that.
Greek myth has Hecate and Hermes. They're both gods of magic. So
I think with
very studious ones.
The AD&D cosmology that Omanal pointed out there, that it almost sounds like, gods become the conduit for magic. That is for magic that originates in the positive and negative material, whereas wizards just figure out the math on how to bring it into being directly.
And that's kind of the thing of, when you look at it is, I guess, I mean, it's not just the conduit. It's, they are the ones giving you these powers and they can take them away. Whereas magic is, you can't take his power away unless you somehow shear him off from the ability to access other planes. And I don't think that's the other part is, depending on how you want to do it, is looking at 5e, you can't just pray to your god and hope that something comes your way as much. I mean, you can do it in first edition stuff, but there's a big difference. Be like, I'm a magic user and I reject the gods, and then you start praying and they're like,
yeah, no, I'm not helping you out. And you go, in the meantime, my paladin, you know what? He gets this protection circle. We give him all this really cool stuff. Yeah.
L said, what do you mean? What does Dragonlance have to do with anything? L, I don't think I mentioned Dragonlance. I'm like,
I don't know.
like,
it tends to be,
he's
me
poking
with
fun.
It's a non sequitur.
okay, that's fair. Yeah, it's like, okay.
Halakar dared to play a cleric of Tharisdon.
Oh,
Now,
why? Why?
I would class Tharisdon as being the single most evil entity that was
Demon.
ever created for any version of D&D. He was
More
so
than-
bad
tried
that
to wipe him
all
out.
the other Grey Orc deities, whether good or evil, banded together to banish him because he was so he was so much trouble.
I can't help but that was some psyops on Asmodeus's part. He probably just tricked everyone else into diverting to Tharisdon. Because that is something he would do. That is something he would do.
Even Asmodeus would fear Tharisdon.
I don't think he didn't fear him, but that's precisely why. Like, he tricked all the others to say he's more evil, get rid of him. That's some psyops, man. You know he would do it.
Oh, possibly. Oh, yeah, possibly. Yeah.
But I think the thing that, speaking of gods here, it's kind of disappointing when they put Tiamat as just a dragon rather than as a god. I mean, they talk about a god, but I mean, Tiamat was not that tough compared to a lot of the deities and demigods. So
in D&D, they've always wanted to stat out everything, haven't they? So and yeah, I think Tiamat was a little bit underwhelming.
Kalstad, Tharisdon wanted to destroy everything. I think we can firmly establish he's not just chaotic. He's
Tharisdon
evil.
always struck me as more of a Lovecraftian elder god kind of a character rather than a conventional deity. He's outside the everything, and he's old and he's forgotten and he's just waiting there and he doesn't care about the mentality of anything.
I wouldn't say he's Lovecraftian because he's not apathetic.
He was.
Yeah, he is. He's Lovecraftian when you look at it, but
I suppose.
Well, I mean, so if we're going to talk Lovecraft for a moment, Cthulhu and all of them, they all seem evil because what happens because of them are evil, but ultimately they just don't give a shit. It doesn't even register.
That's it's the equivalent of us, looking at the particles in the air when we swath of a hand through. We're not on the same scale as them.
Yeah,
Echo.
I would never felt like Tharisdon had anything against anybody in particular. They were in his way, and he had things he wanted to do.
It's a good example of how the gods.
And humanity is the Girl Scout cookie salesman on his way to the bus. But
I'm going to bring up.
And DK, if you don't think Tharisdon's Lovecraftian, I suggest you read the module WG4, the Forbidden Temple.
I read his lore a while ago. I read his lore a while ago, and this was like years ago, so I might just be misremembering. It probably is. I just don't remember.
Serious Lovecraftian elements in that module.
To be honest, considering how
much
the sword and sorcery and Lovecraft and
his
all
influence,
that was an early influence on the guys back in the day who making the game, it stands to reason.
I mean, I'm reading Clark Ashton Smith, so the amount of Lovecraftian style influences that him and Lovecraft had on the game it's very obvious. So
I'm going to bring up one other thing though is when did they bring him in? Did they bring him in because they got banned from using Call of Cthulhu and said, well, we got to bring him to a deity similar?
That's possible.
The other.
Yeah, I don't think the Lovecraft estate or the Institute really was very litigious on copyright, to be honest, because Lovecraft wasn't.
Well,
I don't think
Chaosium was. Chaosium.
No,
Chaosium.
They never got banned.
Right.
There was a very long, involved process there.
Yeah, I forgot.
They had
I
permission to use it.
Yeah.
But they never got it in writing. Yeah.
Well, no, so there, if you ever want to watch, there's 2 videos out there. Sandy Peterson himself does a video on it, and then also Seth Skorkowski does a really good video on the whole history of that kerfluffle, and why there's actually 4 editions of that old deities and demigods, because there's one where they had taken out the Lovecraft gods but kept in the special permission granted to use them. Disclaimer: even though they didn't have them in the book.
Yeah.
That's fun.
L. Yeah, I agree. Clerics need the gods. I never said otherwise. So.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I mean, looking at some of it though, is the other part is, and I hate saying this, and maybe we're not mentioning it. The great thing about Clerics, having it in your campaign, is if the players don't know what the hell they're going to do, you can send down a divine, this is your goal and this is what your task will be. And then the players can decide on how to go from there. I think that's something that, for a plot hook, that's pretty easy to do. That's a lot easier than saying, "Oh,
it is good because you can give them divine intervention, not necessarily intervention, but guidance as well. Especially when players are sort of when they're uncertain. It's just like I don't know what to do, but it doesn't have to be as black and white. Of like, well, you have to achieve X. Sometimes it can be a feeling of there is something evil in the area. And you feel the righteousness to find it and defeat it. Now, what that is, that's now for the players to go out and go for it. But that's the motivation to go out and do it. I try to, like you, Omen, I try to avoid, as a DM, directly telling the players, here is what you need to do. Unless we are in the circumstances of, for example, I've had a player who struggled playing a paladin the way that I would imagine a paladin to be, so I had to do a direct intervention to sort of go like, you're now skirting on that edge where the DM is potentially going to be kicking you as a paladin. You need to take some time and review. And I've had the other moments where it's been more, here is a feeling, here's a vision, here's something that you can interpret as a player, and then you can try and go out and you'll deal with that. And I'll leave it for the players to creatively interpret that as they want.
And a really good example of that in the old Clash of the Titans movie. You remember when Zeus kind of sits there and goes, "Find and fulfill your destiny," and that's all he gives him.
Yeah. Well, the other part is, and this is the part with Paladins, which I wish they delved a little bit more into some of the recommendations for the books. Find your when you hit, what is it, 4th, 5th level, your steed, and it makes it very easy to do, like you said, Clash of the Titans. Oh, here's Pegasus, go find this, and that's one. And then the other one is that you can go, guess where the Holy Avenger is. You can give clues and move them along, and they'll be self-motivated to do it because yes, they want that +5 Holy Avenger.
Or
if you're going to give them the
or in Windgrace's case, find the Holy Shoe.
If you're going to give them the quest to find that Holy Avenger, it's a great adventure in an early Dragon magazine called Fedifencer, which is a special Holy Avenger that's in a Githyanki stronghold in the astral plane.
Why is it there?
Just got to sort my dog out for 2 minutes. So
I don't know, but it's one of my longtime favorite adventures from Dragon, because it takes place in it's an extraplanar adventure, but also it has the Githyanki fortress mapped out, and it's all nice.
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 Yeah.
There's all great plot hooks, and anyone that plays Paladin wants that Holy Avenger, and you can put in 15 or 30 adventures in between there while they're trying to quest for his holy sword. And that's what I love about that, is you can go, well, this will lead you over here. You have to find this person over it. So you're like first level, like, oh, we'll do this. You just have to.
I hate to say it again, but the old Clash of the Titans movie is a great example of that. Again, you have to go to these witches to get the information, which will then lead you to the where the Gorgon is, which will then lead you to the
Perseus is the ultimate D&D hero, as far as I'm concerned.
And
he does it all.
I outed myself on this a while back. I often forget that when I'm running games, all the weird side questy stuff you can do. I'm very easy on my players, I think, in a lot of ways, where I'm just like, okay, you have to go get the thing, and then they travel to get the thing. And yes, they have to get there to get the thing. Yep. But there's not a lot of like, okay, well, you get to this place and he's got the information you need, and but he's gonna make you go on a whole ass quest to get it,
Well,
or fetch quests and favors and stuff like that,
It depends on like what kind of time you're dealing with. Like if you're looking at, you play weekly, you've got, probably a year, 2 years worth of time that everyone's going to be invested into, then you can probably jump in and do some of these,
I play
things.
weekly, when I'm not feeling too crappy to run games.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, even with when I did my Pathfinder game and we had, the weekly games, and even with the side things I would throw at the group, even though there was like, okay, so you've got to, like at level 1, we've got to close a demon gate, and there was a whole bunch of like middle quests that they had to do to sort of progress up, side things to sort of go and develop relationships.
But
and one of them was gone.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I think more to Omanal's point, maybe it was Omanal who was making this point. Divine characters really give you that built-in quest hook.
Yes,
that's divine player characters, because God said so. I mean, you can do that with any character. I mean, any character can have that crappy dream or see the image in the fire at camp at night. But when the cleric says, hey, my God,
we got a thing
last night, and we're on the clock.
There are nine wraiths in black riding after us, looking for this fucking MacGuffin that we have. We might want to destroy this fucking thing.
Yeah.
God said so. Let's hustle.
And then of course, if you have players that are a little bit more militant minded, a paladin's a great way, because then it's like, we have to go defeat or destroy this thing, or
gotta be organized
in the name of.
In the name of the great spaghetti lord in the sky, we have to go and do this, and then forth you go. But it's a great way of like pushing it through. And even hell, I mean, assuming you don't get a dick player who then picks up the druid, for example, you've still got the whole thing of like, well, the order is at stake. We have to go and defeat these creatures, because they're going to down the line snowball into having a greater effect upon the environment, and that will have a major catastrophe for us all. Ergo, here's another one, because again, not necessarily God, but the environment, the earth, our way of life is at stake.
I would honestly say that you could even, like, I know like druids tend to be like neutrally aligned, but you could easily just tell the druid, okay, look, you believe in neutrality in the sense of preservation of nature. You may not agree with laws and civilization or good or whatever, but if this force goes unanswered, your forest is going to burn, and then your god's going to be like hella pissed at you, and to the point they might be dead. So,
well, again, go on.
I've always wanted to play. When I haven't actually played in games of AD&D all that often. I've almost always been the eternal DM, but the druid is one of those classes that I would like to have a go at playing sometime. And I don't so much see druids as specifically following a deity as they draw their power from nature itself.
Yes.
There might be a god. There might be a god of nature.
I mean, you could argue that it's the divine essence of nature itself. That nature itself is a divine force. Like, and if you look at the D&D the 9-prong alignment system, like if we are going to say that druids are naturally aligned and they're of neutrality, neutral is the most powerful alignment there is. And if we're going to look at that as the perspective of they worship nature, which you should, then you can actually see nature on a grander scale as the most powerful divine force in the game, because it occupies 5 spots on the 9-prong alignment system. It's very powerful.
You
so
can also fit it into the cosmology and say that druids draw their power directly from the positive and negative material planes.
Well,
that's where you're both
from the universe.
That's,
the universe itself.
That's where your growth and death come from.
You've got the elements, you've got light, dark. I even argue that they can also draw from the Fae and the Dark Fae in terms of the powers. It depends on what it is that nature needs them, but ultimately it is still nature that is their lord and master when it comes to it. And it's not always as simple and cut with the whole thing of like, I can just go and talk to a tree. It can be as, go on.
I would like to say hello, Fiore. It's good to see you. He says, "Hi, hey, hippie boy. The balance is weighed in Chaos's favor. We need to help us. You need to help us right now."
But see, I'm going to bring a little bit different. To me, druids are tied to the material plane, and part of me goes, now first, this is what I'm just coming up with, is once you leave the material plane, you have no more power, because you're no longer drawing on like everywhere else is like a paladin would draw it from heaven for being lawful good. The clerics would draw from all of these other deities. The magic user gets it from the other, positive or negative material, positive or negative planes. But the normal material plane, that's where you draw it from, which means that when you leave, you're not going to get anywhere else because that's not your domain. Once you've left your domain, you're done. There is no, hey, I'm going to go over here because they're in other areas. It's the way that I feel about it. The other part that comes down to it, I don't like in the way they do this, which is pure neutral. To me, is when I say balance, is that they need to make sure that there is, how do I want to put this? I almost feel it's
order.
Between order and chaos. And I want to really bring this up. It's not so much between good and evil. It's more between order and chaos, and the fact that you need a balance of both. Because if you get lawful or if you get order, it calcifies everything, which doesn't allow for growth. And then you get the opposite end, which is when there's chaos, is it becomes completely destructive and doesn't allow for things to build up either. So you need, and this is where I really feel it's more of the werewolf aspect, and I know that Elfbait knows about this, with the worm, the weaver, and the wild. You need that counterbalance between all three, and when they're out of sorts, then bad things happen. But I sometimes, though, I loved the druid when I was a kid, but the older I get, is I actually like the druids that are more from the Iron Kingdoms, which is they are not good, they are not nice, they are what we would classically define as evil to keep the world somewhat balanced.
AD&D had plenty of examples of those, though. There are so many mad druids or evil druids and stuff.
While we're on druids, I'm just going to fetch something. Just bear with me.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
it's going to go into the other room and grab a druid. I mean, that's something
if
you
you
can do, right?
Well, not since Caesar's time has there been druids in England, as far as I know. They kind of got wiped out fairly early on. So
I don't know. But yeah,
at least in England.
Well, I mean,
but
that's of course completely discounting neo-paganism, but
but neo-paganism isn't really much like the druids. They really aren't.
Stop!
Actually, stop cracking the whip. Stop cracking the whip. No, bad. Let the tangents happen. It's where the interesting stuff happens.
No. I'm going to bring this up. Is every group had some, and I won't call them more shamans kind of thing, where they're deeply in touch with nature and they draw their. It's always that crazy.
In Japan, it's the Shinto guys,
Yeah, and I think that's in some ways
Shintoism is shamanism.
Yeah, well, I mean, but what they're doing is they're getting their power from the area around them and the spirits around them, and that's where I think that's one of the areas I wish they had done more with druids, was that they had brought that in, and I think Exalted probably does a better job with that aspect. With hey, I'm going to appease a lot of these nature gods to prevent really bad things from happening.
See, I would say Elfbait that they're not really shamanistic, because shamans tend to be like mystery cults, and Shintoists is a very public religion.
Now,
Christianity
was a mystery cult at one point, but look at it now.
And it wasn't really a mystery cult, not when it was founded. It was a fairly open religion. That's why it succeeded. Gnostic Christianity was a mystery cult. Gnostic Christianity was, but not the more mainstream.
Every religion is a mystery cult until it gets big.
Let us move on to something else, please.
How many of you have played that module?
Beyond the Crystal Cave?
No.
No, because it says UK on it.
Because I'm not a filthy nerd.
Yes, you are. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
This
I'm a
adventure-
dork. Big difference.
Beyond the Crystal Cave lies a mystical garden, a magical garden, a protected place
With
where
the drugs.
time. If a druid character is in the party in this adventure, they cast spells as if they are one level higher. This adventure is very much designed to let the druid take center stage. The garden is filled with natural creatures that live in some form of harmony, or not perfect harmony because it's natural, but there is some form. There is a natural
Peace.
harmony to the garden, a peace to the garden, and the reason for that is it introduces a deity,
Oh,
a protector of the garden.
Oh, nice.
Drawn from Celtic mythos, and it is the Green Man, the god of growth and abundance.
the Green Man.
His alignment is chaotic neutral
What?
because he believes entirely in freedom, balance
That's
of
fair enough.
freedom.
That's fair enough.
He's a heavy drinker. He likes it. He likes his hops. It says here, his symbol is the hop, the foundation of the finest ales, and he adopts the guises of a gardener, a brewer, a forester, and so on. He can't harm you. What he does is he intoxicates you with his breath, and he's very powerful. But he doesn't actually physically harm you. But he is the guardian of that garden, and that almost says to me, should druids always be true neutral, or the whole idea of the freedom, the chaotic neutral druid it's quite natural.
Well,
I-
if we're going
It
to
just
go
points to
back,
the fact that the alignment system was never expected to be absolutist and prescriptive.
Yeah.
oh
yeah.
no, I mean we've had this discussion several
Yeah.
times, and yeah, no, that's definitely the case because you can still have what I've recently injected into my AD&D game is Paladins, which is a form of druids from 3.5 or 3rd edition, where it is effectively druids who have gone to the just extraordinary extreme, rather than it being, growth and harmony between the different ecologies. They just go all ham into one aspect, like growth, but like excessively so, to the point of where like other life gets strangled out. They almost cause a blight and a further impact to the world around them. So, yeah, just seeing Geek is just going, shh, shh, they mustn't learn our secrets. Take away the chickens.
Are you shushing your wife or shushing the dog?
You don't want to answer that, Saxius. You don't want to answer that.
No. I mean, but that's where I like the aspect from Werewolf, where you get
Yeah.
the three in there, which is the worm, the wild, and the weaver. And the idea is that the weaver, puts something in there, and then the wild is this crazy aspect that causes this major growth, and then the worm is what destroys, and so they keep each other in balance. And the problem is when one gets out of balance versus the other, then the other two go crazy, and that's one of the reasons I like that. Yes.
Yeah, like when the Weaver gets out of control, that's when you end up with the stuff like the technocracy and stuff like that in Mage, because too much pattern is a bad thing.
But see, I left the wild because then it's so crazy that now the players that were used to Werewolf normally are suddenly trying to tear down all these crazy creatures and trying to hold that in check and say, "Come on, Weaver, do a little bit more, a little bit faster."
Yeah.
I would like to point out, I am so glad that Elle has said this comment. Druids are tree-hugging hippies. Think Radagast cleric, or Gandalf was the cleric, Saruman a wizard. Where were the blues? I completely agree. Gandalf is a cleric. I'm very glad that someone else besides me also thinks this.
No.
Gandalf was a demigod masquerading as
Yes.
a wizard.
Yeah.
Ergo, a divine being, a servant of God.
No.
No.
Well. They were
Like,
all
go back and read the books, DK. Just read the books.
Yeah. Well, they were
Nah,
all
reading is
servants of God.
lame.
But I do think that that's
maybe that's another topic of what happens when your NPC takes over the party. Like they did in Lord of the Rings. No, but yeah, but I agree. I like the druids a lot better when they can be neutral good, neutral, or neutral evil, and go from there. Because then you get something that's much more sinister in certain cases, or they can, because then people get this range. I love the circle of Ouroboros in Iron Kingdoms, because they would be typically classified as neutral evil. And that
I always thought that the Ouroboros guys, though, they started out as druidy, but they've kind of gone into they've gone off the deep end. They're in the same category as all the mad druids in D&D.
Yeah,
So,
I kind of like to imagine though that if I were to do it, I would say that at the beginning of all things, when the world was far less sophisticated, where the lines between divine and arcane magic were blurred, there were 3 groups of druids: the ones that were neutral good, true neutral, and neutral evil. The neutral good ones became the clerics. The true neutral ones were the wizards, and the neutral evil ones were just the evil cultists that run around and kill everyone and commit human sacrifice.
I'm just going to answer L's comment here, because if you look at the druids' initial weapons, they were all based on tools, agricultural tools, harvesting tools,
scythes, sickles,
hunting tools. Yes,
spear.
And they're also not answerable to a god.
And the reason why the druid could use the scimitar is there was no scythe or sickle in First Edition AD&D. The only weapon with that curved blade was the scimitar. Hence, the druid was given the scimitar.
Scimitars were supposed to be reskinned as scythes for the and stuff.
I mean, you can also find it in the Dacian and Thracian region of the world.
Ramphora and the other one? Yeah, the Falx.
Yeah, the Falx. Yes. The Falx was also a very popular one, especially amongst the Germanians and Thracians.
Oh, the Falchion?
No, the Falx.
No.
It's a two-handed weapon with an inward curving blade that was designed for basically cutting people in half.
Yeah.
Oh, it curved forward like a coppice?
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right.
The blade was on the inside of the curve, facing forward. Yeah. You held it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And it was supremely good for cutting through the Roman shields, and it would dent or straight up cut into the Roman helmets. It made it a monstrous thing that they had to innovate.
Was known to be able to cut a man down from shoulder to waist, basically.
Imagine a scimitar type. Imagine a scimitar type sword, but with a 2 or 3 foot long wooden handle on it. Yeah. And that's a Falx.
Oh, was it a polearm of some kind? Or
no?
Oh, okay. It's just a sword.
Kind of in the same category as like a great axe or
okay.
sword.
Just I think it was a Scalagrim has got like a Falx one-handed sword that he goes through.
I'll check it out.
Go and look at it.
Evidence that early medieval, like Dark Age era Spanish even had a similar weapon like that.
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if I've seen with a coppice blade that the Greeks use, I've seen that thing. Like Lindy Bates did a video on it. You would not want to be on the receiving end of a whack from that thing. It would.
The Copish is more akin to an axe in a lot of ways. If you think about it, it's got a longer drawing blade, but the way it's arranged, it's designed to like put the impact along the edge in a kind of
way. It's not a power. It's not a power. Yeah, it is. Yeah. He likened it to a compact weapon, like a halfway house between a sword and an axe.
Yes.
So the next question then becomes, at least for me, is that what are the steps that can be taken for a divine character to lose their powers? I mean, we know the Paladin, but let's talk about the Clerics. Let's talk about the Druids. I mean, if we want to throw in the Rangers as well, we can talk about what it is that then causes them to then be severed to have that connection or that favor. How do we handle that?
Depends on the if we're going for a standard D&D thing, I would say if the cleric disobeys the direct edict of their god. Like if a god of war becomes a pacifist, loses his powers. A god of healing spreads disease, loses his powers. You know,
Spreads disease
Also-
amongst the good or evil. Because I can
just
see
in general,
also-
I don't think a god of medicine would want diseases spread at all. You know, it would be among the good or the bad. I would they'd probably say no. Because that's antithetical to the core of my beliefs. You can find another way to kill evil. Just don't use the weapons of my enemies.
I'm gonna. When you're talking about losing their powers,
Well, just like
I-
when they lose their powers, what can you like? What the players can do to either lose their powers, indirectly or intentionally, or how
for
do you
me,
handle?
for war would be showing cowardice. It's not that you can't retreat. It's whenever you try doing cowardice. It's whenever not wars usually have a purpose, and I'm not saying that everything needs to be constantly, but to me, you're either training for war or you're going to go through it, but you can't just simply say, well, I'm going to do this. To me, there's a lot of different aspects.
What about give peace a chance, guys?
Well, I think
No.
also from a game mechanics point, I would say that you'd want to do any of that after a protracted series of and repetition of those failures, because
one
act of cowardice. Well, and I say that because I've run into DMs. They're like, oh yeah, and he ran away from battle, and so I just using the existing example, he ran away from battle, and so I stripped him of all his powers. Well, that was dumb.
Well, it depends on the god. Like the Greek gods, they would be that vindictive and petty, but I would just say don't use the Greek gods in a standard D&D game.
Busy sleeping with somebody else's wife.
Well, Athena, no, because she's a virgin. But sure.
Zeus and rest. But
true.
Almost always the Greek gods did it because you offended them, not because you didn't necessarily follow everything perfectly. It's like the Valkyrie. If she touches your shoulder and you're like, well, screw this, I'm running away. I'm like, hold on there,
Well, no.
But Elfbait's absolutely right. It takes time. It needs to show that there's a flaw in your character. Not that, hey, look, we're going to do a strategic retreat. We're going to do this, but I mean, if you're suddenly going to go over, and there's a difference between that. Is you have to live to fight another day in certain cases. But there are times you look at the players, you're like, what are you doing, you coward?
Oh god,
yeah. Or if you're you're a good cleric and you're constantly burning down,
slitting the throats. They're slitting the throats of surrendered enemies. Yeah.
But I also think that it comes down to how the player plays that character. Like, going with the war god again, if he retreats, but then there's some contrition there. It's like hey, I was wrong.
I mean,
what can I do to make it up to you?
Here's another way that you can even be kind of esoteric. Like in Eras of Indra, there's if you're a Verakashatri or a paladin and you walk over the shadow of a Dalit, an untouchable of the social class, you have to purify yourself. You actually have to cleanse yourself by meeting a priest of like 7th level or higher to cleanse you, because you are considered tainted. Like you can't sleep outside of sleep with someone outside of marriage. You can't eat raw meat. You can't touch feces. There are weird things that you can do that aren't just the violation of your god's tenets or his sphere of influence. You can put in like weird stuff like, oh yeah, you can't eat poultry on the 3rd Friday of this month.
But
that's taking things a little further. That's taking things a little further than your normal fantasy game.
I know, but you can. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying you can.
Well, and you take away slight powers from them. You don't take the whole thing away. I think it's it's like, oh, you know what? We're not going to do the 9th level, or we're not going to do a 7th level spell. You're just going to be able to use 6 until you do this. It's you need a hierarchy of sins. That's what I'm referring to.
One thing we haven't touched on yet, though, is, I certainly something I would like to push a bit more in my games is the idea that a god is only as powerful as the devotion that god gets from their worshippers. So if you strip a god of their worshippers, then that god will lose power, and thus remaining clerics of that god may well struggle to keep any powers active because their god will be losing influence.
I watched a group playthrough where the DM had an event where one of the gods fell from the sky, and the effect of that was that all clerics of this god, whatever spells they had prepared that day, that was it. They were not going to be able to call forth anymore. That was the powers they had stored up in themselves, and they could not do anything else. Now they were now normal people with a limited amount of spells within them. But that was a very massive event in that campaign where an entire sect had been affected.
It wouldn't be something you did.
I don't like
it would
this.
Be something calamitous. It would be something calamitous.
Yeah.
I don't really necessarily like this for two reasons. One, it kind of in some ways like, oh, your gods aren't being worshipped enough, and if a player of that god suddenly loses their deity, well, their entire class gets shut down through no fault of their own. I would much rather do this as kind of a, well, your god is disappointed in you, therefore he's going to punish you, and you need to go through repentance. And two, I also don't like it because it firmly puts the power of the divine from a bottom-up perspective, where the divine should be top-down in authority. The gods should be the ones imposing.
I don't entirely agree with that, because there's already canon in place for AD&D in the sense of, we've already mentioned Tharisdan. Tharisdan has become forgotten and almost irrelevant by the time.
The source material that D&D is based on is heavy with that too. A lot of the Conan stuff has,
there are deities. They're just powerful. Look at Vecna. I mean, Vecna rose literally from the humblest of beginnings as a slave all the way up to becoming effectively a minor god. And he doesn't need the worshippers per se, but it is feeding him. It is going that direction, and it's actually to the point of where in Greyhawk, if you're caught being a worshipper of Vecna, you are put to death.
I wasn't saying that this doesn't happen in D&D. This is just something that I do. I don't like this. It's just not my bag,
I'm going to say this, and it depends if you have a single pantheon or if you have multiple pantheons.
I tend to only have one pantheon. So.
Well, again, this is what I said. Is it depends where you are, because you also have to look at the aspect. Is this encourages dynamism in your world, because then it says, I want worshipers, I don't want worshipers, and it really puts in Grummet as a big factor of, I have to have my orcs going out trying to kill these things. I mean, otherwise I lose power. So it causes a literal fight among gods in this aspect. And like I said, this Neil Gaiman does this. But if you look at it, is if you have two greater gods going at each other, and they're kind of evenly matched, if there's a major cataclysm and you suddenly wipe out half, they go down. But then the other aspect is that if you have a forgotten god, let's say that you're in a pyramid or something, or you're in a tomb, and they wake up and says, you are my first worshiper, and they slowly give them powers they go through, then they can rise up and say, well, how did this person get more and more power over time? And that's the aspect that comes down to it. And I like the idea of it because it really creates a dynamic aspect. Whereas if you have a single pantheon, like John over there was talking about, then yes, the gods are kind of fixed, or very similar to what happens in Dragonlance. The gods are kind of fixed in where they are, but it gives a real impetus for why the gods are playing on the material plane with each other, and there's so many conflicts between them. And I think that's what makes it D&D interesting. It's like, why would two lawful good gods be fighting each other? And you're suddenly going, well, because they're competing over the same worshipers. And
I mean, like I said with them, when I was like I'll give you an example. Like in Lion and Dragon, the way that this is handled, how you have different how do you handle monotheism in a world with multiple monotheistic, let's say, pantheons, like just gods? And how Pundit does it is that there is one true god, like in Plato's idea of the realm of forms. There is a perfect manifestation of law as a concept. And in the material world, there are avatars of law. Like for Europe, it's the sun and Mithras. For the Persians, it's fire. There's the Hebrews, they exist. For what would be the Muslim equivalent, it's the god of the crescent moon. They're all avatars of law. They're all true deities of law. But where the debate comes in is that which manifestation is the correct manifestation. That's why there's it's not that the manifestations are fighting, it's the believers. That's where the debate comes in. And high-ranking clerics realize that they're all correct. That they even like at the higher echelons of the clerical order realize that the god of the crescent moon and the god of the sun are the same deity. They all know this.
But that is a very specific RPG,
I know,
and the majority of us are looking at the pantheonic version that D&D is going by, where they don't have the monotheistic. As a matter of fact, it's always polytheistic. There are multiple religions, and there are direct conflicts between them. Like if you look at, oh god, I forget the name of the elven goddess in the Forgotten Realms, and Loth. Yeah, Carillion and Loth. Like the two of them are at direct war, just open warfare, and it's reflected in their followers. It's absolutely insane. The lengths that the two of them go to whenever they engage with one another. They're followers, they're divine beings. All the way down. It's such an ingrained thing between those two. Sects that they have to be at conflict, and it's something that the gods and the followers are more or less pulled into. It's a huge part of it, and that's a lot of what we see within at least within the D&D worlds and a lot of the OSR games as well.
Well, I mean, even with I kind of like what DCC did, where you can get patron spells from your gods, which I find interesting as well.
Do they?
But,
I didn't realize you could get patron spells from them. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I haven't read DCC in a while.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's after the spells at the end that they talk about their patrons, and then they give spells.
Right. Right.
So, and I find that that's interesting. But I in some ways, I do wish that. How do I want to? And I hate saying this because I like rules light systems, which they get too heavy after a while. I do wish they had more. I think DCC is. I really like DCC the more I read it. If you can deal with the randomness. But
with DCC, it's just for me, was too bulky in the wrong places and not bulky enough in others. So
DCC
I dropped
too
it.
gonzo for me.
I like gonzo. That wasn't the problem for me. It's just
there are too many charts is the problem with it, and this is from it's because and what I say is. And I don't mean charts behind the scenes. It's that it's charts that the characters directly interact with. But I really like a lot of stuff with DCC because to me it's like basic D&D that we added a couple of newer things to. And I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's the convention game. I'm not going to disagree with some of that. But I mean, when you look at the adventures, I can throw that adventure from DCC into anything with OSR. The old D&D stuff pretty easily. Which is what I like about it, and then you can do vice versa. But yeah, I think when we start looking at it, if we're looking monotheistic or we're looking at a certain set of gods, that's one thing. But I like having motivation for my gods, and I like conflicts. And by having multi-pantheons, and then whether like Elfrate was talking about having woodland spirits that bring stuff up, and these gods, then you can elevate. So over time, it's like, well. So-and-so gave me this. And then as you start getting powerful and you start getting more and more followers, then they can go up to demigod, which is exactly from deities and demigods. And then over time, they can get lesser. And then over the thousands of years or however big, they can become greater gods over time.
Mechanically speaking, monotheism can be run in D&D just like any other pantheon, though. If you look at Catholicism, for example, all those saints could be like demigods or lesser gods. And so, in fact,
that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, in my Valdyria campaign that I mentioned earlier, it's just that Renaissance one. The religion they found has basically 3 gods and then a bunch of functionaries that fill roles that are more like saints. So if you go into one of their temples, there's a central altar to the main sister, 2 altars to her two like lesser sisters, and then all these nooks and different wings of these big churches, these cathedrals that have all of the little lesser, angels and I can't remember off the top of my head. I gave them some name, to basically demons and devils that are worshipped actually as a whole, as a pantheon, but it's very much that if you were to convert it to a real world, religion, it would be much more monotheistic because you've just got like one primary deity and then a bunch of lesser entities that all serve that primary entity. And I think that, if I was to ever write up Catholicism again, it would be like, I've got 265 or whatever different saints.
Oh, and then they each have their patron. Well, the other part that I think that comes down to it is, I'm going to mention one thing that we went to the back at the beginning. What would clerics be in, without gods if they're atheists? As well, in retrospect, I'm going, well, that's why you play Dark Sun.
The only, we did dip into the cosmology of D&D.
Sure.
So it's possible that the atheist cleric has figured out how to tap into the positive material, or the divine energy directly by basically through his direct inspiration, but doesn't need a god, because we kind of already discussed that in the set cosmology of D&D. There's that the energies of the universe come from planes. So,
there's one way.
If you wanted to allow an atheist in your game, you could decide that the atheist had figured out a way to just transcend the need for divine intervention.
Yeah. And achieve apotheosis himself. Like there's another way you can do it. Rather than say a deity, you worship a divine force. Like say I worship law and order. They worship a concept that is divine, that isn't necessarily intelligent, but it behaves with like it can impose its intent on people, almost like in your dreams, like feelings.
That was basic D&D. Basic D&D didn't have any gods. It was just like cleric of law, cleric of chaos, cleric of neutrality. That was it.
Well, I don't think clerics could be neutral in basic, could they?
Yeah, they could.
Could they?
Yeah.
Oh, could they? Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's I'm thinking of OD&D. OD&D couldn't do that. My bad.
In AD&D, clerics couldn't be true neutral. They were
that was druids. Yeah. Well, yeah, technically they could because druids are clerics, but that's a semantic argument.
And I thought clerics could be neutral if they worshipped a neutral god. Anyway, there were a few of those, but
first edition certainly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking the at the end of the day is, if you look at basic, it was kind of up to the players to define what their god was and go from there. And that gave them some freedom with it, but because you had the class limitations on like what you do with, once you went to 2E, and then you started playing with this game of, well, how can I min-max my cleric? And while I like the idea, you have to make sure that each of the spell realms are equivalent. And that's one of the problems that I have also in 5E is, what is it? The Enchanter doesn't even have like third level spells, because fear, which to me should affect emotions, isn't even part of that. It's an illusion spell. And what the hell? Anyway, so yes. Anyway,
right. KVK's asked here, so let's jump to the good stuff. Divine intervention.
Right. Are we talking like mechanical divine intervention, or like just like a flavor thing?
I'm going to give an example. I'm going to give an example from a recent game of mine. I probably mentioned it on stream before. One of my mages had found the Book of Infinite Spells.
A what?
And what it is a magic item that the mage keeps at home. And it's a spell book that is open on a totally random spell. And if the mage casts that, the mage has free access to that spell at any time. But if they cast it, there's a chance the page will turn. And on the next page, there will be another spell, or the next page might be blank. And there's only Book of Infinite Spells is a bit of a misnomer because there's something like 20 to 30 pages in the book. Once you get to the last page, it's no good anymore. Now, my cleric in that game, so my magic user in that game, was lucky enough, after several quite poor spells, to have the page turn to the spell Gate.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
Completely randomly. And they were playing G3 against the Giants. All of the Fire Giant King. And they'd gone down the levels and they discovered the lower levels were infested with drow. So the player sat there and I could tell he was mulling something over in his mind. And once they found just how many drow were down there, and this character was an elven magic user, the character says, "I'd like to cast Gate, and I would like to gate in Corellan Lorethian."
Oh.
And you have to weigh up whether the entity will be interested in what they've been brought in to accomplish. And basically it was like the party have discovered that the drow are pulling the strings of a force of giants which threaten civilization in Western Greyhawk. Corellan Lorethian obviously clearly hates drow, hates Lolth, everything they stand for. And so, of course, that deity would want to get involved. So the net effect I had was the drow flee from the hill. Corellan Lorethian causes all the drow in those lower levels to flee. And I thought, right, that's it. The party have basically won G3 with this master stroke. And that is when they chose. That is when they chose to charge a red dragon, and nearly all died.
Here's the point, and this is where I kind of feel that, it sounds weird that there should be rules on gods on how they're allowed to directly intervene. And many times I feel, I know what was the later editions, they started using avatars rather than the actual god.
God,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, that's because they were tired of people going through the deities and demigods and killing everybody. I did that.
I know. Well, I did it too, even though it has teleport and they can teleport instantly. I'm like, well, they teleport before you hit them, behind you and stab you. Okay, good. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I'm like, it's the rules. It's rules as written. No, but I think that there's certain aspects there because I don't. It's not that I don't mind divine intervention where they may help. Just like we're talking about the Clash of the Titans, where Perseus is down and Zeus looks over and he lifts you up, lifts Perseus up and then wanders off.
He does it off, kind of offhandedly.
Yeah. If you sparingly and kept for the right moments, it's great.
Yeah.
That's where the mechanic is good.
Yeah, so there's got to be a purpose for the divine intervention, because when you have to get the attention of a god or a goddess who is going to be besieged on all fronts, from worshippers, people going out and doing massive sacrifices to get their attention, and everything in between. You have to get their attention for something, or you have to be divine enough to have their attention when you need it. Ergo, why it's worth, making sure that whatever the divine character is, that they're in the good books. And that's, something that they should have earned as they've been playing. And then the next part is then going to be, what is the intervention for? What is the purpose? Because if it's the case of, saving their hide, well, very few gods would actually go out of that way. At least me as your DM, I wouldn't really just have the gods do anything like that. They might grant you a spell in your hour of need. They might grant you a moment of wisdom. Or, in the case of my second edition group, they just used a spell of augury, and they worded a question very, very, very well to the god of numbers, trade and money. And they basically asked, what are the odds of us coming out on top of this in a much more better worded phrase? And I had to then basically sit down and go like, okay, well, what does the god know? What is going on? And how can I word this to the players without directly telling them what's going on? And that can be it's a really good exercise for anyone who DMs, and it's also a great test for the players to sit down and like they would really have to think methodically like what it is that they're looking for. But yeah, no, interventions is something that should be used very sparingly.
I think I've used it maybe once or twice in my entire gaming career, and once was actually pointing out Mage's Musings comment here, Divine Retribution, and that was I think I mentioned it on stream once before, and that was the thief in the party who repeatedly affronted a god's religion and then tried to invoke the name of the god to heal a party member.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the god struck him down, healed the party member, but struck him down by making him suffer every point of damage he healed off the party member.
Yeah.
Oh,
I allowed that in my campaign with Corella and Louisiana simply because it was right for the moment. The players had never tried to do that before, and it fitted the events of what was happening.
Sure.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. In this case, I mean, it was a coincidence. I just happened to read a really good article in Dragon Magazine on curses, and I was kind of hot to use them. And so, but then the thief in the party is just like, I'm gonna rob the priest on the road. I'm gonna use his stuff to get free room and board at the temple, at his temple in the city. I'm then gonna steal the altar's holy symbol and all the holy water out of the basin on my way out, and then I'm gonna invoke the name of the god to try and heal a party member. Well, yeah, you're going to get kicked by the god.
Well, and to me, divine intervention doesn't have to be that it's that the god actually has to manifest necessarily. I mean, I pray to Odin as we're about ready to get struck. Okay, it strikes down the frost giant. I'm like, okay, that allows me to escape, but that doesn't allow me to beat everything. And I think that there's some times where I think that, and I'm not saying, again, some, like you said, sometimes it just fits and you do whatever's in there, but I would rather the player, I don't want to feel that the player is somewhat invalidated or that they were, well, I mean, we all know that this is literally true, the Deus Ex Machina. It's like, oh, well, they'll just do that. I really do believe that it would be much better for, okay, the lightning struck the frost giant. He lost half his health and now he can't see, or the Jarl, and he's blinded. And you're like, oh, okay, I have given you a leg up. It is up to you to finish it, kind of thing. Well, otherwise, I'll just find another party. That's sometimes the way that I feel about that. And I don't know. Like we're all talking about, I don't mind some divine interventions, but I like them to be. It gives the players a leg up, but it doesn't give them an instant win. So now if you don't go in there, and I think that's the other thing is, how do you all feel? Well, we're talking about divine intervention. How do you all feel about the ending of Q1 where you kill Lolth?
Well, as Carl Stafford just said, he's had 3 different parties attempt to kill her and none of them succeeded. If you play that module properly, they shouldn't succeed.
Well, she has such a low health, and her real weakness is holy water, and that's the splashing for it that really does her in.
She's only a lesser goddess, so
Yeah. Well, but you want to talk about something is if you win that, you have, and you kill her on her home plane, she's dead permanently. You have now removed everything. Speaking of the drow no longer get their spells. They no longer can convert. What happens to them as a race?
Well, they just come back into the light of Corella and Lorathan, or they find some other evil god. Maybe Therisden picks them up, considering he was supposed to be the real big bad evil guy at the end of Temple of Elemental Evil and all that. Anyways,
Yeah.
or or just a far more tragic fate. They get overrun by the Durgar and the Illithids, and Oops.
and have their brains removed. Well, I was
Yep.
saying about holy water though. If you're using D&D rules properly, you should not really have any vials of holy water left by the time you get anywhere near her, because cushion saves.
So many evil things on the way down there.
Oh, yes. And plenty of saves
Yep.
against.
You got
Plenty of
demons
saves
as
against. Yeah.
guard dogs.
And if
I-
you're using item saves, how are those flasks of holy water going to survive that journey?
Yeah.
You put them in a bag of holding,
That's what you
and
do.
they'll be
At that
fine.
level, you start stuffing that bag of holding full of.
Yeah, as I say, put them in a bag of holding, and they'll be perfectly fine.
Just
Or a
just
Hubert
cut
or a Howard's handy haversack. There you go. You're fine.
just make sure the bag of holding gets ripped at some point.
Just green slime. It solves everything, including players.
No, see that's where you go. That's where you go 4D chess. You get a material that a green slime can't corrode. You put it around a bag, a regular backpack, and you stuff the bag of holding into that bag, and then you're fine. And you put some fire-resistant plates underneath the material that resists the slime, and then it'll protect it from fires. Boom! You're perfectly fine.
Your arms are broke. That's what you are.
And
Getting all
over, and over encumbered because
Yeah.
you're talking like
Well, that's what you have
stone is the
levitate
only
and
thing with the
fly
slime.
for. That's why you have levitate and Tantus floating disc. You'll be fine.
Personally, I just love kobolds with ceramic jars full of green slime hanging over passages that they hit with sling stones.
That is actually kind of funny.
It allows them to hit way above their weight.
Is
I
there
have been
way-
through a meat grinder in Aaron the Pedantic's OSC game with kobolds. The amount of sessions it took us to smoke them out and the amount of PCs we lost, and they didn't use tactics like that. We got fucked hard by that.
Kobolds should always be using tricks and traps and
Yeah.
Oh, they do use tricks. They just didn't use that one. They used pit traps. They used caltrops. They used traps and slingshots and choke points. It was horrible.
baskets of scorpions.
Oh,
Yeah.
we didn't see those. Fortunately enough. But oh god,
Thurston
I
Howell-
fucking hate
Thurston-
kobolds.
Thurston Howell's mentioned the blip dual pulp.
Oh,
Anyone,
yes.
does anyone know?
Sexy lobster goddess.
Yeah, I'm sold. You've got me. I've got lobsters and I've got a curvy woman. I've got it.
God damn it.
There is an
God damn
image of there is a statue of her in D2, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, Shrine of
Yes.
the Tower.
Yep.
What I can't remember is if there's a way of getting her to manifest in the adventure. I know she hasn't got any stats in there. Is there a way of getting her to manifest? I can't remember that.
You need
It's called
enough
DMPR.
Kuatoas. You need enough Kuatoas assembled and worshipping this statue, and she will manifest.
I love that about Kuatoa, the fact that they can just believe things into existence.
Oh god, it's like I mean, taking it now onto a tangent because this is
Well,
always
it's technically divine faith. It's on
it is
topic.
exactly. Well, what I've done at least with the Kuatoas in my game is that they've gone down the route of rather than we can believe in anything, it's like we can breed into existence anything. So they will, if they need ogres, they will literally breed their own people into ogre-sized monsters. They will breed hydras, usually in very deformed and horrifying creatures. So to them, biology is just a giant just arms race of we will just continuously breed ourselves into whatever monster we need, and then we will mass breed that, and then we have whatever we need. Which
I mean, they just create their own they just birth their own pantheon, quite literally. I mean, beholders can do that. They can do something similar to that.
That's
they can make
reproduce.
Yeah, they dream. They dream that beholder is created, but beholders of how xenophobic
they hate each other.
Are. They hate themselves.
No. They love themselves. They hate all others of their kind because they view only themselves as the truest version of a beholder. Because they're the ultimate solipsist and narcissist.
Yeah, but that's how I run with my Kuatoas. But then I also make them devoutly fanatical to the one evil god in my world. And they basically believe that, oh no, we are the chosen children, and we shall just rise up from the deep dark of the underworld, and we shall take the world high above. Yeah, we don't like the sunlight, but it's ours. It's the principle that matters.
Well, and this again comes down to my point. Looking up Blib Dual Poop, she is so much more powerful than Lolth when you look at her. That you're like,
And she's won my heart.
Yeah, well, she's 20 feet tall.
Of course you would, Saxius. Of course you would fall for the tentacle monster.
It's not a
There's
tentacle
no
monster. She's got
tentacles. What?
pincers.
My
Pincers
God.
and long antennae.
Hey,
My God.
It's a tentacle by another name.
No,
They've
it's
got
not.
pseudopod.
She's no different than the Venus de Milo if you cut off her head. I mean, that's it.
And her
The what? The what? The what, DeMilo? What were you saying,
Venus de
Omanel?
Milo, the statue, the one that doesn't
Yeah.
have arms,
The
you
Greek
just cut
one.
off her head, and Blibdubble, you and her would be indistinguishable.
I've never heard of the Venus. I think I know what you're talking about. The armless, right? Yeah.
Yes,
I think
yes.
the Venus de
armor
Milo
is-
has more clothes, I think, than Blip
Yeah.
Boop.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, all
I've
I'm gonna
said
say
that-
is Aphrodite is actually someone you'd want to have sex with and you'd want to follow. She's infinitely less psychotic.
Blibduble's only 20 feet tall. I mean, it just reminds you of a Futurama episode. So that's.
Oh
What about
no, I don't
Zoidberg?
want this. I don't want the snoo. I don't want the snoo.
Just think of all the thank you. Think of all the woo, woo, woo noises that would be made. That night.
No. I if that's the case, then female Zoidberg gotta die. I'm sorry. That is an abomination.
No, I don't worry. DK, I've sent you a fantastic
Oh.
picture of my waifu. It's in your inbox. It'll be there for you in Discord when you open it up. It's beautiful.
I
It's
hate
right
you,
there.
Saxius. I hate you. I hate you so much. Oh my god.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I couldn't let that one go.
You are a degenerate, Saxius. You actually are. I'm sorry.
I've never hidden that. Like, how is this a surprise?
No, I just feel the need to keep saying it. You fucking cultist of Slanesh. This is why the Empire did nothing wrong. It's people like you.
Big shed a tear. Exactly.
Death to the Xenos! Death to the heretic!
And this is one of the reasons I think that gods should be playing more of a, the fights between their followers and not them in direct combat for the most part.
I think Grumsh would disagree. He definitely wants to beat the shit out of Krell and the Raven.
Oh no!
Yeah, but too bad he's never going to do it because he's a bitch.
No, I'm saying in a campaign is the kind of thing is that's where I'd rather just instead of them having their avatar come down, it would just be and maybe their avatars would fight, but not the gods themselves per se. But
Thank you, Geeky. Thank you.
Oh jeez.
I took the liberty
Oh. Oh my god, Mage, why? Why are you encouraging him?
It's an actual quote from the show.
I hate this so much. This is
Right, we're going to go back to the topic.
yes.
One,
Jesus
We've been on
Christ.
topic this entire time.
Next
It's
bullet
fine.
point
No.
on the topic.
we've talked about.
I think
we've
I've
talked
found
about-
Saxius's weakness for allowing tangents. Just let him be a pervert and it'll work. There you go.
Blibdubulp is effectively the opposite of a mermaid. That's all. Anyway, go ahead.
Opposites attract.
Right.
Oh God. On to the topic at hand, please.
Yeah, we've talked-
we've
if you don't mind.
We've talked about paladins. We've talked about clerics. We've talked about druids. What about rangers? And the various
God,
versions of the ranger that have been.
Oh man.
throughout the years.
If they have magic that is explicitly clerical or druidic, then I think that they should be tied to the gods. Yes.
I think rangers should be tied again to the material plane because that's where they are for their druid spells. And it depends on what we're looking at. Here's which version when they started, the ones with the magic user spells or the ones with the druid spell.
I would
Because
prefer them
yeah,
to be
of course,
tied
in
to the
first
material.
edition AD&D, they had magic user spells, didn't they?
Oh, I know. But
I think
see,
I
those
think in
come
one of the
from two
supplements
different
for OD&D.
locations. Those come from
Yeah.
two different locations. The druid spells come from generally the material plane or the god, and the magic user spells come from positive or negative planes. So that's why I said it doesn't feel right. I understand why they did some of it, but it never felt right for rangers to get magic user spells for what they were intended to be.
I never
I would have
really
to agree
thought
with
of
you
them
there.
as being connected to the greater cosmology. I thought it was just more of a way to give the Rangers that sort of
Edge.
well, not edge, yeah, I guess, but sort of like that extra connection to the woods, that extra, that mysticism, those like mysterious rangery arts that they could gain at higher levels. That
So
I mean, like in OD&D, Paladins didn't get divine magic, but by AD&D they did, and then the Rangers got
if you look
druidical
at
magic. It was just kind of the counterbalance,
look at the spells that they were getting though, because they're very nature orientated
like
and
pass
like
without trace and stuff like that. And
exactly
Mhm.
good berries, all these things. So you're looking at yes, clerical, but they are very in the spheres of plants, nature, animals. That range. Like there was a
they
very
Only in
specific
almost
late-
theme.
read
only in
more like
later
those
editions
tricks
did,
that rangers in fiction could pull off, rather
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
making them a class ability.
Yeah.
just
But even
slap
with
magic on it and call it a day, basically.
Well, it's a
Well,
way to
even-
mechanically do it within the framework of the existing system. So
But even mechanically,
it's-
like they still had certain things, like they could still do, hide in shadows. They could still move silently. They still got some of the thieves' abilities that they could work in, assuming that they didn't have heavy armor on. But then that's because they tried to mishmash it, at least in second edition, which it's a whole different kettle of fish I want to discuss. But in terms of magic,
And they didn't get very many magic user spells, but man, the fact they did get some magic user spells, it's kind of like, well, we want to make something just different from the paladin, and that's what you kind of felt with it. So,
well, they were in a way out of the paladin, but more of nature itself, because they were again the ranger. They were the people. They were at least the way that I see
somebody
rangers.
at
They are
Gary's table wanted to play Aragorn.
well,
Yeah.
yes, but like
But Aragorn-
rangers are also it's the first line of response when something in the wilderness is encroaching upon civilization. They live out there.
Yeah.
They are the first line.
They're frontier fighters. Yeah, they're the frontier fighters.
They are frontier fighters, but they're also the people who are looking out for like the civilization that they call for home by basically going into the areas that the other most sane people wouldn't, and basically going like, well, I am watching over this area, so if something is crawling out of this area, I will know about it. I will be able to track it, and I can warn people, or at least guide and prevent people from being harmed.
Which is why they do extra damage against giant class monsters, the very things that threaten civilization.
I just checked my AD&D PHB, and they get both ranger, and they get both cleric and magic user spells.
I thought it was specific druid. I think in AD&D it's druidic and magic user, not clerical.
But the fact that they even get magic user spells is the weird thing about.
Yeah, they
it.
get like a couple of them though. It's not a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
a
many.
total of-
There's no. I'm just checking this now. There's no specific limit on which spells they can get though. So
yeah, they'll end up with like one, like a first or second level
And
magic user spell.
And they don't get it. They don't get them until like what 9th or 10th level. Same with the paladin with the clerical magic.
8th for druid, 9th for magic user. I mean, they could. They could just like have magic missile.
It's not thematic, is I guess the problem with the spells that they were limited to. I would have much preferred if they had said, "Hey, they can take these spells like web. They can take a few other spells." That would have, to me, have been nice. But you're right. That's the problem with the magic user for the first edition for Rangers, and maybe they fixed it in one of the options.
It does seem oddly inconsistent because druids and illusionists got their own spell lists, which kind of overlapped with cleric and magic user generalist lists, but they didn't do a special list for rangers. So
I think I think it was just maybe Gygax was pressed for time, and he just thought this was an easier fix than duct taping an entire new, like coming up with an entire new spell list for an entire new class
possible.
that most people weren't even going to get to the level of anyway, because they don't get this till at least 8th level. That's a lot of experience and a lot of time. They might not live that long. The campaign might not go that long.
Well,
You know?
remember, Gygax was doing all this stuff that people were getting up to these levels. I mean, we're talking 9th, 10th, 11th through 13th.
Yeah, I know there were people who did. Yeah,
But-
I know there were people who
but-
did. I'm saying that the generality was most probably didn't. That's the thing.
No. I agree with that point. But what I'm saying is, would it have really been so hard to say they're limited to these spells for the magic user? That would have been much easier, in my opinion, for that.
If anything,
I
it's
suppose,
page
yeah.
count because this book is tiny in the old
Yeah.
player's
Yeah.
handbook.
Yeah,
and so
Yeah,
adding extra things like because why didn't the Paladins get their own spell list? For
Yeah.
if you're gonna go
like
that
what
far?
I just think it's kind of. I think they kind of made the ranges just a bit too more powerful in comparison to the Paladin. To be honest, like if you compare the two, you know.
Oh no!
I would not agree. No.
I would strongly disagree. Well, here's the thing, though: is it would have been a little. I mean, for a ranger spell, you could have because the spells overlap a lot of times. All you had to do is say for magic user spells, you could have just put a very small list. I think the problem really comes down to is that he wanted to differentiate them more from paladins, and that
Gotta
was
be going to
really
fetch
about it.
books.
Oh my God! The porn bots have arrived. Jesus Christ!
Well, we were
right.
talking about snoo with lobster women. So
Right.
I regret nothing.
And
Fuck
speaking
you,
of-
Saxius. Fuck you.
And speaking of which, there's one other thing I think that comes into it. When we're looking at these spells, is this is something that's not talk about this. Look at the font size that they used in these books.
Yeah.
I mean,
font size.
me.
Look at the rules cyclopedia. Gah.
I'm reading Osric. I'm reading the pocket-sized version of Osric, the A5 size. The font in Osric in one book that's 400 pages is bigger than in the A4 size of AD&D 1E.
Actually,
Jesus
interestingly
Christ,
enough,
Gygax.
with the Ranger, I mean, even when this came out, they didn't even feel the need to give them their own custom spell list.
Yeah,
But they said, hey, half-elves can be rangers because, fuck humans, I guess.
well, you know
Doesn't
what?
matter.
I thought Rangers. Some of the things but I'm saying when you look at how much was actually written in these books, because we all know it's only 128 pages. Yeah, it's on 8 font. I mean, come on,
next
guys.
to nothing for art too,
Yeah, I mean, when
compared
you look at
to
this,
modern day books.
Yep.
This book probably is as thick as the Player's Handbook in 5th edition if we actually went by word count.
Half elves could always be rangers, just a point.
Yes.
I don't think they could. They?
Yes, I've got the page open at the moment.
way.
I'm gonna pull a source on you. I've been doing this since I was 5 years old, and I did it to my mom. My mom's like, you were the only little kid I knew who would go up to your room and grab a book and show me the page number where it said where you were right.
Hey, Elfbait.
Yeah, but that's because Geek is an autist like I am, and he's as stubborn as I am.
No, Elfbait. I did that in school about dinosaurs, where they said, no, you don't know what dinosaur you are. I went home, I brought back the book, and I flopped it in front of my teacher when I was 7 years old, and I said, "That's the dinosaur I like, not that one." And I was mad. I was just like, and my mother would encourage me to do that stuff whenever it's there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like, how dare you, teacher? How dare you?
Oh, he said, well, don't tell a kid that he's wrong when he's like, no, that's not the one I like. It's this one over here. Especially when, that's
That
what
reminds me of the art teacher who stole the pencil from my hand to correct my drawing.
Oh.
He's like, your squirrel's not fluffy enough. I'm like, by the time he was done, it looked like a fucking mink.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, when we're going to speak about I'm going to ask you guys some questions because I know that they weren't allowed. Did you allow, before Unearthed Arcana, clerics for your dwarves, elves, and gnomes?
Yes.
Nope.
And I'm with Elfbait.
You
I absolutely
should.
did.
We were
I
never
absolutely
married to level limits or class limits when we started playing back in the day. It seemed dumb to me that an elf who could live hundreds of years is never going to be as good at some things as a human. So, I understand why they existed.
Sure.
And,
I was
I
13,
understand
and because the
physics.
book said so, that's what happened.
I did.
Well, my
As
mom
it
was
all
a
should
hippie,
be.
and I was raised
Rules
to be a
as
free thinker.
rules as written. We have rules for. I can't even say that with a straight face. I can't say that.
I'm going to
No,
say this
to be-
much, which I say to everyone. If you're playing it, you're playing it wrong. And you say, well, I play by raw. You're playing it wrong. Well, I homebrew it. Well, then you're playing it wrong.
Yeah, the guys who created the game, the guys who still create the game to this day, don't even run their games.
Oh,
way
God.
before published.
win. Gygax win.
Gygax didn't
Fuck
even
off.
play Gygax.
No.
I know. Yeah, that's the amazing thing. Those fucking retards don't even realize that.
No. By my understanding, what his son did to it, he did play that. But if you actually read the rules in there, it specifically says there are times to get rid of the rules, and he gives a perfect example in there. And that's what gets me about it is he played by the rules when it was appropriate, but there were certain times when he was like, "Look, I don't want you going there. You fight a wandering monster, you go home. You come back, you fight a wandering monster, you go home." He said, "That's no fun. You're not going in a dungeon. There are times to skip those damn wandering monsters and let them actually adventure." So yeah,
Yeah, of course.
Anyway,
Yeah.
back to the topic. Allow me to be some of my inner sexes here and
It's spreading.
No, bad. Let the chaos come in. This is the one time I allow chaos. This is the one time. Tangents are
You
fun.
allow chaos, please.
I know.
Chaos
It's the
Square's
one
not
thing.
for your allowance.
Anyway,
Fuck.
what's
you.
up? What's up?
Right. What's next on our
Uh,
list of divine magic type stuff?
Thirst actually asked a question. Actually, can druids even multiclass in 1E?
I thought
Yeah,
they were
I
multi-classed.
I don't
thought
think.
that
Well,
could they?
no, because multiclassing is for multiclassing is only for demi-humans, and I don't think non-humans can be druids.
half elves were unlimited. Halflings were up to 6 levels.
Right. So, but I don't think half elves could. I think half elves said they could only multiclass as like fighters and magic users, fighting magic users, and clerics, and they could be thieves or something like that. I don't think they can multiclass.
According to the original Player's Handbook, half elves could not be a multi-class druid, but I believe they could, according to Unearthed Arcana. I might be wrong. In second edition, they certainly could.
Yeah. So I hope that helped. Monks.
No, monks were human only.
No, only humans could be monks. So no, and humans can't multiclass. So they can.
Well, but
could you
dual class?
Could you dual class them?
Yes, you can dual class.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm trying to see.
Doesn't look like druid is listed in any of the multi-class combinations in the PHP.
I mean, you could. There could be people who would argue, well, druid is a subclass of cleric, and half elves can do it. So
they would be wrong.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I know, but there are people like Geek pointed out in the polearm video he did. There were people who tried to argue that a lucerne hammer was a fucking hammer, and it's very clearly a spear. So it's like, no, your cleric can't use a lucerne hammer. It's a fucking spear. Like, Jesus Christ.
Well, the problem is what they really did was they didn't identify which weapons were bladed or that they just assumed you would know. That was the big problem with 1E because they just assumed every character did. I'm trying to look in here into Unearthed Arcana for the what they're allowed to mix up with, and I'm not sure. So, but Druid was allowed with what?
I would say for Unearthed Arcana, probably just treat it as if the same way that they would do it with cleric, probably that they have to be fighter, magic user, druids, and just that would probably be the easiest way to do it, probably.
I wouldn't allow him. I want my druids to be my druid.
Yeah,
that feel.
That's the same with
Rangers. You ever
Rangers.
played Baldur's Gate? What was it? Is it Jaheira, character in Baldur's Gate?
Yeah, Jaheira
was a fighter druid.
Yeah,
interesting.
Fighter druid.
Half elven fighter druid.
Huh.
I thought they did add some of them. I'm trying to look for it in Unearthed Arcana where you're allowed to do your, multi classes. But yeah.
Sorry, guys. My dog has just walked into the room. She needs some hugs.
Mages Musings in first edition, they weren't. It was in second edition that first that classification first appeared.
Yeah.
Regarding weapon classifications in terms of piercing, slashing, and blunt, first appeared in second edition AD&D, but not in first.
But that's because they just assumed, and I think that's the problem with a lot of them is they assumed a lot of stuff that players would know. And the more that I look into, like I used to skip these as a kid, the more that you actually read the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, he gives rationale why all these things were that we just ignored as kids. Well, what do you mean with a round takes 1 minute? Well, he specifically says in the Player's Handbook, and he says, play these rules as I've presented. It's done, hundreds of hours with hundreds of players. He actually gives a reason for a lot of this stuff that we just ignored. That's okay. I do understand from a game design standpoint what's going on there, and I think that that's the problem that we have with the more modern ones is it seems just capricious instead of actually giving sometimes the reasons of why they're there.
Sorry, I had to step away. Sorry about that.
I think
guys.
there was, maybe some of early D&D's undoing, though, and why it was kind of more of, I hate to say, elitist, but obscure hobby. Because you had to be a special kind of weird kid to really get into early versions of D&D.
It was very protective, I think.
It was written very technical and very high-end, highbrow, and was not approachable to as many people. I know, that's probably why so many of us played it with apps without knowing whole sections of the rules were in there.
Because we read the little bit and then we did just enough to create a character that we wanted, and then we looked at the spells and we ignored everything else in there. I think the other thing is if you've actually looked at RPG Elite explaining why the hobby does not have many black players, that's a reason as well. And he talks about very poor educational system for that. It's really interesting watching
his video on that was actually really good because it avoided a lot of the old tired arguments, and he really just spoke to the environment of a lot of black kids growing up. It's just not conducive. To them finding D&D to begin with, let alone play it.
Yeah, well, and from where I grew up, which was around the military, all education was really pushed for everyone. So we didn't have the same aspects that they're talking about in the general population, because the military was about 20% black, and we had lots of everyone going in there. We all went to the same schools, and everyone was expected to do well, or their parents would kind of beat them. So it was not.
I know my buddy Sean was. He lived in a very Catholic household and still managed to be a regular member of our D&D game, even though his mother did not allow it in the house. I actually got kicked out of his house one Saturday morning because they came back from church from some Saturday service, and I was watching the D&D cartoon in their living room.
Oh no, really?
We would be up in his room playing D&D, but very quiet, so his mom didn't hear.
You succeeded your hide and shadow check every time.
They were the type of very religious family that, on nights when I would stay the night, I'd have to stay up in his room while they were down there doing all their Hail Marys and stuff like that, and
Yeah, at least when I was growing up, I didn't see much of that, and I grew up in a Catholic household. But to be fair, we were fairly moderate. Everyone I knew was fairly moderate.
So Pacific Northwest is kind of where it's lightweight up in the Pacific Northwest, because Pacific Northwest is, if you're retreating from American civilization, you eventually get up to the Pacific Northwest, and the only way you can go any further is to end up in Alaska.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't happen. It's just such a paradigm shift for me, because all the Catholics I grew up with are fairly chill.
My mom openly opposed satanic panic crap around me. It's like, my son is reading. He's bringing home entire piles of books from the library. He's making friends. He's doing problem solving, math, and she just saw all the benefits.
And he's happy.
Yeah, he's
He's
happy, and he's not out. He's not out doing drugs and partying all the
Yeah,
time.
he's
I'm like, Mom.
he's spending all his
funny when
money on imaginary elf
when she's making
games.
that argument, though. I'm like, Mom, I'm 10. How much drugs and alcohol and partying am I supposed to be doing as a 10-year-old suburban American?
I can
love-
see
it was-
I can see Sextus's blood pressure rising as we veer off topic.
I'm gonna have to call it a night because
Okay.
I've got a lot of crap I need to sort out with my European partners tomorrow, and they start the day an hour early.
He has to deal with the Irish. He gets to deal with the Irish again.
I get to deal with the Spanish now.
Oh wow.
Oh wow! Is it a step up?
No, no. Like I get the beauty of like whenever something goes wrong, it's like Oscar, help. All right, I'll come in.
I have a friend over here that I really need to someday introduce to Saxius. They could spreadsheet the universe together. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
My buddy Derek over here is just like he's the guy who had the armor class flowchart in 3.5.
Nice.
Oh wow.
What?
Well,
Why?
because all of his feats and stuff, his armor class varied depending on.
I
what
firmly
his circumstances
believe
were.
third edition was developed by Spurgs for Spurgs, and I get to say that because I am a Spurg.
Sure.
I didn't mind third. The problem is that when you look at the
Right.
initial books, the games tend to be very solid. But when you add more and more to it, the question is it really adding something to the game, or is it just making you have more headaches?
And it added so much. It got to the point where if you took anything out, a lot of the system would just start snowballing and falling apart because there's like entire feats tied up into certain things. Like class features would become redundant. Like if you changed how, say, opportunity or charging attacks work, you could change entire structures and classes and feats and racial abilities.
Any
Probably
game is going to suffer from bloat over time. Any game system, any rule system, because the only way to make things generally new in D&D or any other war games suffer from this too.
It's add more rules.
You have to add no more rules. It's very hard to have a core set of rules and keep things feeling very interesting and flavorful. Privateer Press tried this with War Machine and Hordes, their miniatures game. They had a very tight core set of effects that they would write fluff around to create powers and abilities for troops, but that only goes so far, and then you start to recognize those patterns. You're like, oh, this is just D6 blast again. It's this one comes in the color purple and yours is all bees.
I did play their Iron Kingdoms, which basically use the War Machine rules, and I noticed that it was really easy to become a lot more powerful because I played the Circle of Ouroboros and I had a Gorax as my creature, and I like the idea.
Trollkin player.
Well, don't get me wrong. I love Trollkins too, but this was Hordes. You could play Hordes, or you could play. Anyway, the Hordes is where you were not supposed to play good guys. You were playing Tharn and the Alligator Men and the Pharaoh, and so it's like, well, should I?
Kidding? The Trollbloods are the good guys. They are.
I love the Trollkin. Don't get me wrong, but that was Iron Kingdoms. The Hordes version was not. You did not play nice.
There was a Trollbloods army in Hordes. That's where the Trollbloods army came in.
No. What I'm talking about is it's called Unleashed. I'm talking about the RPG.
Oh, yeah.
The RPG, the Trollkins were good, so they were stuck in Iron Kingdoms. But if you did the Unleashed, you got to play the Circle of Ouroboros, and I like their druids so much better compared to the normal neutral druids.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we'll take out this city because I don't like it. It's like,
well, then you have the elves in there that are out to get everybody for what they did for stealing magic.
Well, Symbaroum does that pretty well. I mean, I like the Symbaroum because that really does feel like the Hellboy 2 when they had the Elf King, getting the Anyway, so I'm trying to think of what else do we have for gods that are.
Well, obviously, something we've not mentioned yet, and it's that topic that I've run out of beer for, and that's Call of Cthulhu and the influence of I wouldn't say the divine, because they're not divine.
The cosmic.
The cosmic.
Cosmic.
Yes, on that game.
No, they are divine. It's just the divinity is not a good thing in that
They're not
world.
divine because almost every one of them exists in the universe.
Yes.
Like,
Well,
actually
they're
physically in
well, I
the
mean,
universe or outside of it.
That's I mean,
the study of them can grant you spells, but
It's
they are
true.
spells. There are spells that would tear at your sanity.
Yeah, but Lovecraftian magic was always just basically that whole
science. It's a science. It's magic to us. Yeah. It's just so advanced for. It's like, I mean, even Tolkien kind of said that, like, non-elves called their what they did magic, and they're like, but it's not magic.
Yeah. It's Tuesday for elves, but it's magic for humans.
I mean, for Cthulhu, it's always interesting because they worship these beings that really provide them no additional power. That only want them pretty much dead or to eat them. And that's because they're by their very nature, they're like Cthulhu. While he's slumbering, is influencing the minds of man to wake him up. They're not doing it of free will. You could argue that only the most nihilistic and insane in Lovecraft's world willingly worship them. Most of the people who worship them are either doing it because they were tricked or deceived, they thought it was a different god, or because the gods are tampering with their minds. Like Nyarlathotep does this all the time.
The gods in Cthulhu come from secondary sources too, so it's not so often that the cultists are directly contacting the gods. They're finding an ancient text or that gives them reason. Like, somebody puts together a book and it makes it sound like you could get power from it because maybe the person reading it doesn't understand the full scope of the text. It's like, did you really read the Necronomicon, or did you just cover chapters 1 through 5?
I mean, like, you could even argue that it's like false gods, but the like Nyarlathotep might just say, "I am the god Imhotep," the great pharaoh, and people worship him and perform his Nyarlathotep. Yes,
I know.
Well, speaking of which, we're talking about this, but
normally
I think that we're missing.
Problem saying that damn name.
We're missing one set of gods. If we're going to talk about corruption, we have to talk about the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay gods.
Oh, the objectively evil gods. Cool.
No.
Or the gods of law.
The chaos gods. The chaos gods.
The lawful,
I know
the
nothing
good,
about the gods.
The neutral, the evil, and the chaos. I mean, they have their 5 alignments there.
Yeah.
And their
gods of law are almost as bad as chaos.
Oh, you're talking about the fantasy Oh, okay. I thought you meant the 40K ones.
They're the same ones. That's the neat thing about fantasy and 40K. It's the same. It's the same gods.
Yeah, but there are no, like, all the gods in 40K are part of the Immaterium and thus part of chaos. They're not lawful. The God Emperor.
There are gods of law.
We're talking Warhammer Fantasy roleplay.
Yeah,
and you're right. Is as far as chaos, that's all they're really worried about, because there is no God Emperor in our, which is. But no, I'm talking about the.
Which is a shame.
Well, if you actually look at the old books, they talk about the lawful gods. Yeah, they were about as bad as the chaotic ones.
Yeah, they wanted stagnant, no progression, everything just.
That's because it's because they were ripping off of Moorcock, and he said the same thing. Which,
absolutely,
to be fair,
Warhammer completely ripped off Moorcock for chaos and law.
Well, he didn't just take that. As if you listen to Jordan Peterson, he goes all the way back to Marduk and Tiamat. Now, come on. Talking about you need the balance between the two. So it's an old thing.
Well, no, I'm saying that for the most, like, prevalent ones, like, like the actual chaos symbol was an invention of Moorcock. The 8 point. Yeah, he literally created that thing.
Well, and literally the Warhammer chaos is very unarguably taken from more.
I mean, the way the Eldar in 40K and the elves in fantasy behave are just like the Melnibonéans. Like, they're a 1-to-1 translation.
Warhammer's world is not original, and 40K was even less so.
No. I just meant, but if you look at their gods, where they take divine pleasure in giving you gifts of chaos and a few other things. I actually like looking at those that are.
Well, that's because in the case of the Chaos Gods, their power is directly connected to how many people worship them. It's not. They didn't even manifest in the 40K world until like Slanesh was born out of
the ritualistic and the ritualistic degeneracy of the Eldar. She only exists because of what they were doing, and like I think it was Khorne came about around the time of the human Middle Ages, so about 40,000 years ago or something.
If you believe 40K's old lore, the God Emperor is Jesus and all the other influential leaders of humanity.
He's a perpetual. Yeah, he came about like 50,000 years ago or something.
All the shamans sacrifice themselves to put their psychic energy into him.
To save mankind from chaos, because I think he's older than all the four ruinous powers.
He foresaw. The shamans foresaw the rise of chaos and had to create him.
Yeah, because if they did, they realized, these chaos gods are gonna fucking kill us.
Yep.
Like we don't want anything to do with them.
Let's stop talking about 40K and focus on fantasy roleplay here, because Geek is going over. That's what he's playing now, aren't you?
Yes, and I've done no reading whatsoever on the world lore. I'm just simply playing a humble dwarf tomb robber who likes to hit things with his axe and drink far too much, and has so far managed to get himself locked in the cellar of a pub and damage the profits of the inn, and which has caused problems for that inn, and I've done lots of critical hits against goblins and had to describe very interesting ways in which my axe tears goblins limb from limb. So it's been good fun so far.
Well, I mention it because, we know that the chaos gives you gifts, and it's always funny because there's capricious as can be, and Papa Nurgle loves all of his followers.
No, he doesn't. Nurgle loves only Nurgle. Yeah, and you're wrong.
Papa Nurgle loves all of his followers.
He grooms you by giving you a disease, waits for you at your lowest, and then tricks you into following him. Nurgle is not your friend.
I didn't say Nurgle was his friend. I just said he loves all of his followers.
No, he can't love you. That's like saying Harvey Weinstein loves the people that he's with, and I don't agree.
No,
I don't.
Well, Papa Nurgle is the happiest, most joyous, chaos god.
No, cope. That is a cope. That is a seed. I'm sorry. It is.
It's not
massive
a cope.
It is.
It is. That's exactly
that is the chaos argument, and I don't listen to chaos.
Anyway, but I thought that it was very interesting that they do have their petty magics that they get up there, and then they'll have their miracles over time. And then I'm looking right now on the Tome of Salvation. I know you don't like PDFs, John, but they had a great deal where they had basically all of 2nd edition books and the 4th edition book for like, what was it, $20 or something? And I'm like, oh, great. I get 40 books.
We lost Elf. Fuck.
What's that?
We lost Elf. Oh, okay.
I have like 49 PDFs of all this stuff, which to me is like cool. They gave a great deal for that. See, there he is.
Oh, okay.
The elf has been reincarnated. You haven't been resurrected, elf, because you have no soul.
I hit the wrong button.
Derp.
It's easily done. It's easily done.
But I like the fact of how they have some of these in here, and I think that 40K is another one of those that we don't have to take realistic ones, but like, here you go. You can get the dark gods. You can get the lawful gods. You can get the good gods. You can get the evil gods.
I'm my own worst enemy with things like that because I have the PDF of the rule book for Warhammer, and I did mean to read it, and I have meant to go through bits and pieces in it, but then I went and got myself a copy of Ultima Underworlds 1 and 2 from GOG.com. and I'm afraid that's taken up my time now.
That was fun to watch.
Well, I looked at it and went, how in the world could I ever survive those graphics again? But my real question is, what were the gods in Ultima? I can't remember.
I have no clue.
Oh,
I
okay.
have no clue.
Maybe because they
Probably
had the druid.
ultimate gods of supreme goodness and righteousness. Probably.
Seem to remember them being pretty monotheistic, but or very, very limited scope of a pantheon, at least.
Yes.
There's no sort of clerical, really any sort of clerical effect in Ultima Underworld. So even though the class, there's no priest or cleric class, there's a druid class, but it's only to do with balance of magic and fighting.
I thought they had a priest class in Ultima. I don't know.
Well, maybe in another Ultima games, but not in Underworld.
Not in Underworld. No. There's a paladin class, but it's just again.
What's a paladin?
It's a bad hodgepodge in that game. The paladin is bugged.
No, there's just a joke. There's just a joke that a YouTuber makes where where the main character of the Ultima series in one of the games asks someone what a paladin is, and one of his most trusted friends who sacrificed himself was a paladin. So he kind of flipped out because the character should know this. I think it was Lord British or something. I don't know.
Yep, they did have clerics back then, and at least in Ultima 3. So. And
Underworld came out around the same time as Ultima 7.
Yeah. But yeah, they did have a few different ones in there. But they had a lot of the basic stuff. But yeah, that's because I remember in Ultima 4 you had to get one of each. You had to get like a druid and a tinker and a bard and a paladin and I think there was a couple others in there, but.
Anyway, I'm going to finish Underworld before I play any other games, and then I'm going to finish Underworld 2, which. Do
you what you need to play, Geek? Do you what you need to play, Geek? What? Fallout. That's what you need to play. Fallout.
I wanted to
play Fallout. Play Fallout, Geek. If you like moral choices in an RPG, play Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. I'm not even joking.
No, I've looked at it and. I don't like that weird post-apocalyptic thing.
Yeah, but it's retro-futuristic. It's retro-futurism. That's why it's cool. It's like Mad Max and Forgotten Planet and the boy and his dog, and it's great. It's so good though.
I was hoping that Elden Ring would be on sale on Steam, but it's not.
Elden Ring, it's okay.
It's just a lot of running around hitting things with your sword. So,
it's not Dark Souls 1. I'm sorry. The games have been getting steadily worse since Dark Souls 2.
Never played.
It's still a good game. Just play 1 and Demon Souls, and that's all you need. Don't play any other.
I haven't got a gaming PC. That's part of the problem.
The only one really worth getting is The Witcher. I think that's if you're going to play the old. Witcher 3 was a fantastic game for that. So if we're going to be
Mar Hawkman, that's only the Bethesda games that really hype up the Lovecraftian stuff. The first 2 and New Vegas don't have much in the way of Lovecraft. That's only Bethesda's invention.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other, when we talk about pantheons. I mean, we do a lot of the OSR stuff, but I like to look a little bit more into the 40K, but I don't know.
I have an interesting topic in that regard, interpreting non-deistic religions in fantasy games. How do you and I've done it, but for example, a good example would be say a Native American one, right, where you have raven and bear. And and stuff like that, you do have some anthropomorphic gods and stuff like that as well, but there's a lot of, especially mentioned earlier, shamanistic traditions and stuff that don't really have anthropomorphic deities, and they're more along the lines of gods of place and gods of animals and stuff. Those are actually always kind of interesting and tricky to work into a D&D context. Druid doesn't necessarily always fit it. You could do Druid.
I would argue that the Druid fits the shaman model better than it would the historical Druids would, because they can shape change. Druids in in like Celtic stories, they didn't really shape change. That was more barbarians, you know.
Well, and what I ended up doing, honestly, is you just have to figure out what those, especially if you're just creating one from whole cloth, but is what the creature represents, and then you can just treat it like any other god. It's funny, as it always seemed like such a weird puzzle to me early on in D&D, and then I'm like, it doesn't matter. Bear is the symbol of strength or whatever, and so now he's, and like, to a lot of Native American tribes, the serpent is a symbol of renewal and rebirth and stuff like that. So you just have to apply a sphere to it, and the whole greater lesser deity has nothing really to do with the mechanics of a cleric anyway. So but that was always an interesting experiment for me, was trying to come up with those. The hardest part with those, honestly, is that everything often has a significance and has like a mythical level as well as a mundane level. Like in Japan, you've got Tengu, right, which is just the word for crow, and it's a supernatural crow guy who will teach you sword arts.
I'd imagine you could adapt the rules in second edition's specialty priests to create that type of feel.
Yeah,
and you just simply use the minor and major spheres of spells, which certainly you'd have nature spells, you'd have weather spells, these sort of things. Divination, divination, weather, and nature would be the main. And maybe elemental, but less on the necromantic and less on the protection, maybe.
Yeah, and even in those cases, I mean, you could still have necromancy, that like going back to the Native American, serpent, revive my dead friend, because rebirth.
I mean, speaking of that, and you're talking about minor spirits and stuff. And I don't know how you look at it, because let's take a game that's really out there. If you look at Exalted, where you are effectively demigods holding the other gods in check.
Yeah, that's Exalted's an odd case though, because that's the whole concept of Exalted is let's just all agree to power game. Well, no, everybody's power gaming, so really, you're still not power gaming.
Yeah, it's at a whole other level. Wow!
Thank you, Cold Staff.
At this rate, John, you might be able to buy another RPG or another Fighting Fantasy book.
I had one campaign setting that I'm tinkering with forever, and I call it my paleo fantasy setting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a concept of where you have a fantastic world where what we understand as evolution exists to a certain version as well. So it's a world that's gone through naturalistic phases and into an ice age and everything like that, which has guided the existence and prevalence of things like dragons and stuff like that, and where magic is a resource that's natural in the world, and the quest for magic kind of takes place of the quest for fire, and gods are in their infancy, because right now they really don't much exist. There are a few places where early Stone Age cities and stuff are starting to crop up, kind of like that. The best technology they have in the game in this setting is stone stuff. The best, but it's fantastic levels of stone stuff. So these big ziggurat cities and stuff where you're starting to get these cults that are coalescing, and so gods are starting to be a thing. But for the most part, it's the shamanistic beliefs, and
that would be really interesting to play in, I think.
Yeah, so, the whole concept in there is that there used to be dragons. And then as the world got colder, the dragons kind of retreated, and that's how the various peoples of the world were able to migrate freely, because they all lived in terror before the dragons went to sleep in the Ice Age. But now that
do they solve the riddle of steel?
Now that the world is warming back up, the dragons are starting to wake up and realize that shit happened while they were asleep. So
I'm going to ask you, Elf Bait, Have you played RuneQuest? I have never done it. I don't know too much about it.
I have owned a lot of RuneQuest. I've played the system because, of course, it's the Chaosium system. I've never played RuneQuest proper, which is a shame. I'm a huge fan of the Bronze Age, just in general, like period of history and the level of tech. I always have felt that the Bronze Age feels the closest to a fantasy world that we've ever had in actual history. It's just so weird, the different levels of tech at the same time, and the level of costuming and stuff in a lot of the armies and stuff. I used to have a Trojan miniatures army and stuff like that, and it was really just fun to paint. But I have not played RuneQuest. I have like the massive, super expensive encyclopedic work that they did for Glorantha.
Okay.
Which is ridiculous. If you can ever pick it up, it's awesome, but it's like $200.
Oh, geez. I'm looking at here. I'm just kind of curious because we're starting to come down to the Black Friday sales, which is when, I'm like, is it worth grabbing or not? And I mean, the starter set looked pretty cool.
Yeah,
but
I haven't got the new starter sets. I've got an older Chaosium box set of it, I think 3rd edition or something like that.
And they've got
I
the
played one
slipcase
session
set.
of it.
Okay. Oh, really? What did you think, John?
I enjoyed that session, and it was a Roman setting. But we didn't get very far, unfortunately. It was just one afternoon, just as a one-off, and it was never continued. So
one thing I like about the setting is magic is a skill, and any character can get magic. You just have to take skills in magic and learn and find runes and stuff like that. So,
I can't remember anything about my character from that.
And I like the fact that they seem to ride everything as a mount except for horses in that game. If you look at the Glorantha stuff, they've got like ibexes and zebras and all this stuff. And there's this weird, like there's a race in there of tapir people, and the ducks. Everybody laughs at the HeroQuest ducks, the race of ducks that they have in there. Literally like Howard the Duck, the character. Yeah. They're pretty badass actually if you read their background, and I love the mythology behind them because nobody knows for sure where they came from. They believe that they were ducks cursed to be like humans, and a lot of humans believe that they were humans that were cursed into ducks.
Well, didn't they do that with Symbaroum and they said this is purely a joke? Or is it on one of the back of their things? Anyway, I can't
remember, but yeah.
I was just curious on some of these things, like you're talking about is, since we are getting the Black Friday, is where should I cry about putting my money?
RuneQuest is good to get. By the way, the $200 thing that I was talking about that I have for
okay.
Later, man. The Glorantha Encyclopedia. It's 2 giant, massive, like reference book style volumes without a single game mechanic or stat in them. It's all background, and it has an accompanying atlas. And the atlas is so detailed that it actually marks seasonal maps, seasonal waterways, like rivers that only show up during the rainy season and stuff like that.
Oh wow! So is it the Glorantha, the Guide to Glorantha?
I think it is. It's 2 huge books.
That's what I'm looking at here.
And that is just fluff. And it is written by a bunch of PhDs, and it's like an academic text. If you ever wanted a book that was like, you really want to take a deep dive, like they've got huge, like archaeological translations of frescoes from the real world. But the weird thing about Glorantha that you got to get behind is like, it's a world where the gods exist on the world too. Okay. Like the moon is held aloft by a giant, and you can walk up to that giant, climb him, and get to the moon.
Okay. Well,
because it's an age of myth. It's a mythic setting, and that's also why they set it a Bronze Age kind of technology, is to give it that more of that kind of old Greek myth. I mean, you have to think when it came out originally, it was like the 2nd or 3rd actual fantasy RPG setting that ever existed. Was RuneQuest, and I think they wanted to set themselves apart from D&D, which was medieval fantasy land, by making it that kind of Hellenistic, Age of Myth, it's the type of setting that DK would probably dig because he likes that, gods being very real thing.
It's an extremely rich era as well, though.
Yeah,
if you think
and the whole idea is you're out there questing and going on. It's the chaosing mechanic too. So fights are dangerous, even though it's a little bit less so than like Call of Cthulhu. Like if you take like the basic fantasy, whatever Chaosium's generic system is, which is based on their 6th edition, I think, which is the same one they use for Cthulhu Dark Ages. Hand-to-hand fighting in there isn't as deadly as it is in, say, Call of Cthulhu proper, but it's still something that will screw your character up and you don't always want to fight. It's very much a role player's setting, but the fact that it's a skill-based system in a fantasy setting is immensely appealing to me because anybody can get magic to whatever degree they want to dedicate their character's skills to that. You can still focus. You have to you focus your stat. Are you going to be the tribe shaman? And the civilizations in there exist from pure tribal nomadic all the way up to organized city dwellers and stuff. But there's no plate mail. There's not even, I think, chain mail. I think the best they max out at is like a scale or bronze plate, bronze breastplate kind of a thing.
So I'm just looking at it now, your description of it, and it's like, they say it's $170 for it, but just looking at, like you're saying, with the, they do the cosmology and
it's insane.
So I was just looking at it, they talk about the gods and everything else, and like, well, this might be kind of cool to pick up.
Just a second, I'll go and grab my books and I'll show you the physical copies so you can see how big they are. Just a moment.
It says 14 pounds of books. But I was just curious if anyone had actually, which of course Elfbait has, looked into it. Yeah, D&D is somewhere between Renaissance and Bronze Age.
Had to cross the basement of doom.
Oh, okay. Right. Let's see. Let's
so
see
here are the 2 books plus the atlas.
Okay. And that's the slipcase from the slipcase. Yeah.
I don't have the slipcase. I never got the slipcase.
Okay. Well, I think it only comes in a slipcase now. So
yeah,
that is fairly mighty. It's fairly mighty.
Let me put it next to my head.
Yeah.
But they're really cool. You got like they're volume 1 and volume 2, and they're just full of. I mean, I'll never be able to read all of this, but. One's all about the maps and the topography and everything, and then it gets into the people, and it's every culture has its own section, and then there's the separate atlas.
Okay. Well, and to be fair on this, is I'm the kind of person that would just steal it and use it in whatever other system I like better.
Oh yeah, but you get great maps,
Oh well, I love maps. That's my big, that's why I was just curious on that.
Like I said, I've never played the world, but I had to have this, and my wife actually did for a Father's Day one year. She polled all of my friends, and she's like, "Who wants to contribute to this big thing that Eli must absolutely have?" And so it was cool as a group present from all my nerdy friends to me. But yeah, if you're interested in Glorantha and RuneQuest, it's definitely worth checking out.
Okay, that's what just some of the things that I was just curious about from because we all talk about this stuff and like, well, okay, what are some great things to look at if you're looking at buying things during the Black Friday sales?
I think it would appeal to you particularly because you're you love like the Conan stuff too.
Sure.
Glorantha is definitely the kind of world that like a Robert E. Howard kind of a brain would make. Yeah. Because almost every one of the cultures in there are kind of subtly based on Earth to Earth societies in the Bronze Age too.
I'm just wondering about how you're going to, on next week's live stream, how you're going to persuade Omanel to spend yet more money.
I'll get him miniatures, and then he'll never have any money.
I did some of that, but I'm kind of pulling back there, because part of me goes, miniatures are great if everyone plays here. But if I have to drag him somewhere, like, stop, we're not doing that.
They sit here with me. Here's one of my Inquisitors that I'm converting for 40K.
I I have one of the original Inquisitors. I don't know. It may actually still be made out of lead, so who knows what condition it is now.
Yeah.
But I was just curious on, because I've been looking at some of the things, and I think that there are a lot of good systems, but especially whenever you start talking about the world, this one, that Glorantha one, really has a lot showing that up. Of, you know, here are the gods here, and here are the gods there, and I'm not sure I will buy it, but it at least gives me an idea of what I could buy. It's either that or I'm buying, you know, like hex-clad cookingware. It just depends on what I feel I want versus what I need.
I think another plus for Glorantha is that it's never treated its foe races, you know, its enemy races as face. It does not have a cosmic alignment kind of thing like D&D does. Trolls in there have always had. There's like different levels of troll, all the way down from the low, like kind of orcish, goblinish kind of folk, all the way up to big old troll guys. But they're people and their cultures. And from the earliest days of the game, they've had source books that talk about it. You know, they're another tribe of folk in the world. And it's kind of cool that way. I mean, I have nothing wrong in my brain with the old alignment system from D&D. It was annoying sometimes when you were younger and you want to just be cool and do things. But,
Sure,
you know, I understand it. But it's a different style and different form of play. It's, you know, it's definitely worth it. Anyways,
I think that's one thing that, you know, as we're getting older, we begin to understand why they make certain decisions. That whether we like them or not, we're like, okay. Even for myself, even though I loved AD&D and all the options for it, as I get older, I'm like, you know, I like old school essentials, especially. You know, I'm waiting for them to come in. I mean, I have it. I have the PDFs for them. I really enjoy just that old, simple. Let me stop trying to fret over every little thing and in every combination the players can do. And you know, there's something to be said for whenever we hear onion buns. So, you know, I guess.
Well, and like, for example, as much as I am having fun running 5th edition, I'm very much aware that I'm having to work harder as a DM to make it entertaining. And I understand a little bit more concepts like niche protection, you know, watching my players struggle sometimes to really have a moment to shine in a game. Although I did recently find out that I am doing group skill checks wrong in 5th edition, which answers that. But anyways, I was just doing it really easy. There's actually a just as easy way that still allows everybody to participate instead of the guy with the best skill always doing it.
Sure.
But the whole, like, the difficulty level, the challenge rating, all of that stuff, you know, I realize after going through X number of editions that I'm having the same type and same level of fun that I do in 5th edition that I did back with simpler rule systems. I'm really, really just edgy to run an old school game again. If I can ever find some players. I found one player potentially, but he also has 3 children and they're very young and he's already in 2 games. In fact, one of them I'm super jealous because he's in a game that's been going for 17 years, a campaign.
Wow. Well, and what level is he? That's the other question in that campaign. I just
They're
have to
level 15.
Okay.
After 17 years.
You know,
they've actually done some side quests where they've made new characters to. It's funny. It's like same campaign world, but they've made secondary characters and stuff to go off and do things. So
25. Oh wow, jeez. 25 different. You know what? I'm like, you know what? If you can look at the old Palladium alignments, part of me wants to get the. I don't know. Palladium system just gets too complicated sometimes. Stuff, and I don't want it that much.
Hey, one of the best ways to do alignment was the way that World of Darkness did, with your nature and demeanor. This is how I am, and this is how I seem to be, or how I appear to be.
I like nature and demeanor, and then and I liked how they did the mechanics. I'm not sure I like the newer stuff, you know, that they did in the the Chronicles of Darkness. But in the World of Darkness, I liked with the vampire losing humanity kind of prevented you from really using your powers to their full effect if you're physical. So,
Yeah.
um,
Do we have any more God talk to?
Yeah.
to
I mean,
flip
after
the stream?
Glorantha, you've kind of got me sold on that. That if I have the money, I have the money. Do I want to spend the money?
I don't know.
Say-
My wife spent the money on me, and like I said, I've barely scratched the surface of those books, and I don't even play RuneQuest. So I just love I love a world that's that well fleshed out. You know?
It looks very interesting for it, and the slipcase. Holy crap! Oh, that's the leatherette slipcase. Never mind. But the guide looks really nice for what you showed, and I don't know if it comes with maps. It doesn't say if it does or does not.
Well, so in the 2-volume set, one is almost all maps.
Oh,
The Atlas was a separate thing that she grabbed for me, because she's like, if you're going to run a game world, you have to have the Atlas, right? Because my wife is awesome.
okay.
Like, she came back from the store today with a new braising dish for me, and I was like, I didn't ask for this. She's like, I know, but you've been wanting one, so I'm like, and that is why we've been married for 21 years.
That sounds like you have a keeper.
Yeah.
She's also a gamer and has been playing D&D since high school, so
Definitely a keeper. Definitely a keeper. Yes. Anyhow.
Sorry about that, John. We do have to go.
Yeah, you know
Oh,
what
yeah.
time it is. You know what time it is now. It's past midnight here in the UK, and as always, I never get Thursdays off work. Never. This doesn't happen.
Well,
So I have to be up in the morning to go and open the shop, to sit and wait for customers to come and interrupt my YouTube watching, which is what I tend to do at the back of the shop most of the time.
I'm going to say this much because you don't have it, but for whoever's out there, have a great Thanksgiving. Stuff yourself and don't die of a heart attack from eating too much.
Well, Thanksgiving doesn't exist in Britain, so but I'm looking forward to a weekend of watching sport, because I do like sport. I do like some American sport, and Thanksgiving weekend means I get NFL on the Saturday, I believe.
this is a rough one for me. This is my first Thanksgiving away from my kids. So so I'm going to my brother's, my sister-in-law's family invited us down, but yeah, so
I have my
expect
son.
many tears.
I have my son with me for Thanksgiving, and
Yeah.
we're
This
gonna
is
have
the first
steak
year.
and key lime pie and a few other things. But yeah,
this
This is the first year out
Sunday,
here. We just couldn't get there, and they couldn't get here. So
for those who know anything about British football, there is a possibility my daughter might be playing in the Women's FA Cup this Sunday. This is what we'll be doing this weekend as well.
Ooh.
Against Norwich City in Norwich.
And John, when does she move up to another league? When can we see her play in the in the Olympics?
She's not that level. She started far too late for that level.
Oh,
She was
okay.
only 13 or 14 when she first started playing. The team she plays for, if they get promoted one division, then pretty much all the players will be on professional contracts.
Okay.
They're in a semi-professional division at the moment, where some of the players are on small retainers to keep them just sort of committed to the club. She's not. She's got a contract, but it's not a paying one. So she's contracted to the team, but they're in tier 5 of the women's structure. They're at the top of the division at the moment, and they've got every chance of going up to tier 4, which is the equivalent of, in the men's league, the second division. So it's. I mean, she's only 18. She's just turned 18. She plays mostly for the reserves, an under-21s team called the development team. And they've gone into the bottom of the league structure, which is tier 8 or 9, and are absolutely annihilating every team they come up against. They won their last game 20-0, which in football, soccer, as you call it in America, is an absolute huge amount. But it was a case of a team of 11, 16 to 19-year-old girls who have been through academies, who train 3 nights a week, playing against a team of older women who train once a week, who've probably just kicked a ball for the first time in the last 6 months. And it was just absolutely savage. It was just carnage. So, but this is she's a decent player, but she's got to toughen up a little bit. But she's only just turned 18, so plenty of time yet.
Well, maybe you can see her go. Sit on the bench or whatever they have the equivalent for it.
Yeah, I mean, if she does make the squad for Sunday, then she will be a substitute.
Okay.
There's no chance she's going to be in the starting 11 because they've got a set 11, but it depends on injuries and availability. She probably won't make the team, but there's a possibility. Anyhow, I'm going to have to call it here because we do 3 hours on a Wednesday and about 2 hours on a Friday, and that works out to my free allocation. And I need bed. So I'm going to say thank you, Elfbait, as always. And thank you, Omanal, both of you for sticking out to the end. And of course, we had DK and Saxius with us earlier. And thank you to everybody in chat. Jeb, she plays for Sutton Coldfield Town Women. So it's currently in the main women's team are in the West Midlands Premier Division, and the development team has just gone to the bottom of the Birmingham County League, which is 3 or 4 divisions below. So it's the National League next. The National League is where it starts getting serious. So if they get promoted, they're in the National League. Right. Anyway, thanks for the chat. It's been a very entertaining stream. I think people have been very positive about it. It's been nice to hear everyone's anecdotes and ideas, and we'll be back again next Wednesday. So cheers, chaps. Thanks for everything as always.
Have a good night.
I'll see you again soon.